that's just to have a
Yeah,
voluntary.
non-binding resolution, or non-binding vote, yeah. But restricted down from statewide to just the utility cities.
Okay, missing our city manager.
Nice camera action.
Well, I know,
Right there, the red light on it.
you have it on your...
It's pretty interesting. We'll see who's camera shy.
Interesting to see if she shows up.
Just don't look at the light, you won't lock in.
Let's see if it's...
Now I can't ask.
Good question.
Ladies and gentlemen, forgive us for just a moment as we try to get started. This is a first for Centerville City. We're trying to stream our public meeting over the internet for all those fans out there who want to come to the Centerville City Council meeting. And Jake, it looks like we're on the air.
There's about a 20-second delay, so
Could
if
you
you
come
want
up
to go
here and I
back.
can see if I look 20 pounds thinner or not?
Oh, yeah, we got to make sure we got that.
Did you get that taken
Yeah,
care
we'll
of?
make sure we got that.
You've got the age filter on, so we all look
Yes.
younger.
All right, let's go ahead and get started then. The Centerville City Council is now in session. We thank all of you for coming and joining us this evening. We appreciate so many of you taking time from your busy schedules to be with us. We've just finished a work session, the City Council and staff, discussing compensation plans and benefits in preparation for working on the budget for next year. We'll note for the record that all of the City Council members are here and present. We'll ask you to stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance with me, after which Councilman Robin Meekum will lead us in a prayer or a thought. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to do a thought and a prayer. And the thought is kind of personal, but I thought since I'm new on the City Council, it kind of let people know a little bit about me, because this is definitely not only how I feel about myself, but how I try to treat others. When I die, I don't want flowers. I don't want tears. I certainly don't want people flying to come and say goodbye. If you love me that much, what are you waiting for? Send me them flowers now. Come see me now. Please don't wait till I'm gone. Love me today. And I feel that way, and I try to love others that way today, because I think it's more important today than later. Our kind Heavenly Father, we come before Thee in humility this night. We ask Thee, please, to be with us and help us to be able to work together for the betterment of the city. Please bless us that we will be able to know and have the courage to do the things that will be best for the residents in our city. Please bless any of the residents that have needs or feel that they can't approach us, that they will know that they can. And please bless our city. Please bless our military that protect our country and keep us safe. Please bless our first responders, and especially our Centerville police officers. And we say His prayers, Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you. We've got a number of things on our agenda tonight. The first item, though, is to have our open session. This is a time that allows anyone to come and comment on any matter of public concern. We'll note, if you look on the agenda, that there are some items that you may be interested in, such as we're going to be discussing reptiles and exotic animals. Bruce Pitt's going to make a presentation on South Main Street, and we're going to be talking about green space. We would encourage you to listen to those presentations. There'll be opportunities for public comment on any future development issue when that development is formally submitted. But this is a time anyone is welcome to comment on any matter of concern, and we'd ask you to limit your comments to 2 minutes or less. So with that, I'll open the public comment and invite anyone who would like to speak to the podium.
My name is Neil Lish. I live on 1200 North. My question is, if anybody here knows who's responsible for throwing those little advertising newspapers in plastic bags in driveways?
No, but I'd sure like to find out.
I would too, because it sheared some pins off of my snowblower.
Oh dear.
I just want to find out how you contact them so that they don't keep throwing them in the driveway. Don't they have to go through the city in order to do that?
No.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to be heard? Seeing none, I'll close the open session and we'll move on to the items of business. First of which is the minutes review and acceptance from the February 16th work session and regular city council meeting. Are there any changes to be had to those minutes or recommended? First, the work session or the regular city meetings minutes. If there are no changes, I would look for a motion to approve both the work session minutes and the regular city council meeting minutes of February 16th.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion that we approve the minutes of both the work session and the city council meeting from
I'll second that.
16th.
So moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next up, a staff report and discussion on reptiles and exotic animals in a residential zone. And we have a number of folks who have come to help us with this discussion tonight that we really appreciate it. From Animal Control, I believe Mr. Clint Thacker is here. And we've got some representatives from the DWR, as well as, I understand, a couple of the residents, and Mr. Dix, who's the subject of the complaint, is here. What we'd like to do is start with a staff report. We'll ask Ms. Romney to give us the staff report on this, and then we'll ask Animal Control and DWR to also comment on the situation.
Thank you. I was asked to prepare the staff report on this and also to provide this information for the council tonight. So I did prepare the staff report. I just want to make sure you read my disclaimer that this was, although it's coming from my office, it's not a legal memorandum. I was just asked to kind of get up to speed and provide the council with some information on the facts and the varying jurisdictions and entities that might be involved in this. So with that, I think it might be helpful for the council as well as those here in the audience just to go through briefly. I'll just highlight what's in this staff report. But essentially, I think in December, the Community Development Department received a few complaints about a number of reptiles and animals in a home at 558 Applewood Drive. The owner of those reptiles is Mr. James Dix, and he did say that he resides at this address. The Community Development Department, in response to those complaints, did contact the county animal control because, as you know, Centerville City contracts with Davis County for our animal control services, and we have adopted their animal control ordinances by reference. So that was a good place to start. And Davis County said that Mr. Dix has a permit for a number of reptiles from the Division of Wildlife Resources. So based upon that and a review of the zoning ordinances, the Community Development Department found that there wasn't really a violation of zoning ordinances, because a lot of these animals were pet store variety, like frogs and turtles and others. And the other animals, like venomous snakes and things, were covered by the DWR permit. So no enforcement action was taken, and that was in December. And then I guess it wasn't until February 15th, the city council, everyone received an email, again, complaining about this situation and requesting some assistance from the city council. Based upon that email, I think the city manager said this might be something that we want to just have the council discuss rather than getting into a lot of issues over email. Let's just bring this up in a city council meeting. So that's why we're here, but in the interim, the city manager also asked staff to look into some of these issues further, not just looking at zoning ordinances, but what other kinds of ordinances do we have that may address this. So as directed, staff looked at a couple other ideas. We also met with representatives from the DWR and Mr. Clint Thacker from Davis County about animal control ordinances and the DWR permits and those things. And we also contacted Mr. Dix to get his side of the story. With any investigation, I like to hear both sides. So based upon that, I guess just thus far, what I think we can represent, based upon some discussions with Mr. Dix and Davis County and the DWR, is that it does appear that Mr. Dix has about 200 to 250 reptiles. Those might be frogs, lizards, snakes, turtles. I do understand that he has a few alligators under his DWR permit. There were some complaints about foxes and raccoons and other things like that. Mr. Dix represented that he does not have any of these mammal type at this location. He does have some foxes and coyotes and raccoons, so if you go to his Facebook page where they say we need to find a home for this raccoon, that raccoon is not in Centerville. He does have another site in another jurisdiction. And just to be honest, he did say he has a rabbit and maybe a guinea pig, but you know, they come and go. I do think that the evidence shows that Mr. Dix is an expert in reptiles for all of Utah. And he does provide rescue services. He also provides training for many governmental entities with the reptiles. He'll also go in, I think there was a fire in Clearfield, and there was a very large snake, and he went in and helped the fire department get the snake out and those types of services. So he is a resource to many entities. He has said that all his venomous snakes are contained in secure locking cages. I believe this is part of his DWR permit anyway, but we'll let them talk about some of the requirements there. And he's also represented that he has never had a snake or a reptile escape from his care, and he's been doing this for over 18 years. If you've read my staff report, it is an interesting situation with very many overlapping jurisdictions. So let's just start with city ordinances. So as I mentioned, I think we've kind of looked at our zone. There's a number of areas under our ordinances that maybe this could be regulated, including zoning, business licensing, animal control, nuisance, something like that. As I think, as we've concluded, there's probably not anything in our zoning ordinance that prohibits this, but maybe we could look further to see if he's conducting a business here. You know, we haven't had a chance to look into some of these things, but that might be a question. Does he really need a business license? And again, nuisance, I don't know if we've reached that level, but if that's something the council wants us to look into, those are my ideas under our own city ordinances. And again, there might be some county regulation here because the county enforces animal control ordinances. The county also, by reference, governs all our health regulations. So there have been some allegations of some smells or something like that. Maybe the county health department can go over there and review the site, make sure everything meets the county health regulations, as well as maybe the county animal control. And I'll let Mr. Thacker maybe address some of the areas and loopholes in the county ordinances that are similar to ours, where we just don't regulate the number of frogs you can have or the number of turtles and those types of things, just kind of the pet store variety. And then the third entity that might have jurisdiction in this is the Division of Wildlife Resources, which I'm referring to as the DWR. Mr. Dix does have a permit from the DWR to possess these reptiles and other animals, because the DWR, as a state division, has jurisdiction over wild animals in the state. And so as a wild animal, they can issue some licenses or permits to people. And Mr. Dix's permit, as my understanding is that he has one for educational purposes. And we'll let the DWR talk about his permit and what it allows him to do. And my understanding is that most of the animals, I think it's a fair representation, you know, he can have some of these animals, like the snakes and the alligators and controlled animals, under the DWR permit. We're probably preempted from regulating anything in that area. And then the rest of the animals, though, the pet store variety, there just appears to be a gap under county ordinances or city ordinances. But it may be something that we can look at as to how many does he have? Has it violated any health or business licensing issues? So as the mayor represented, we do have Clint Thacker. He's from Davis County, their animal control. And also Lieutenant Buback and Officer Tucker from the Division of Wildlife Resources. And I think our police chief is here and our community development director as well. So if you have some questions, we can talk about these. But I just want to highlight that, you know, many of us are just getting up to speed on this issue. We're trying to learn the facts and the issues involved. And so.
To that point, Lisa, could you go back and just kind of set the stage? We've had complaints. Is the substance of the complaint smells, sights, sounds, worried that they saw a bunch of snakes going into a home? What triggered the complaint? What's the substance of the complaints we're getting? I mean, I doubt it was very loud snakes next door or something like that. But
I think if I look at the emails, let me go back to those. I mean, some of the complaints that I saw was that he had about 500 lizards. Okay, let's see. He says he's brought over 500 reptiles into the home, garage, and carport. There's aquariums stacked to the ceiling in all areas of the house. He has a boa constrictor in the garage. He has snapping turtles and dangerous reptiles. You know, concerns about the reptiles getting out and injuring nearby children. Concern about a pest control truck parked at the house on a Saturday. Introduction of rodents in the community. Again, with feeding all these 500 animals. Unsightly appearance of the home. I will say I drove by it today, and you know, from the front you can't really see anything. And let's see, aquariums dumped in a truck bed.
so it sounds like it kind of runs the range. There's not one specific area of concern.
And I do think there was a complaint about the smell, yep, and a complaint about wolves and raccoons and other animals sheltered in the residence as well. So again, we're just trying to gain the information about the allegations versus what's going on at the residence.
Thank you. If the council's okay, I'd like to invite the DWR, officers from the DWR and Mr. Thacker from Animal Control to also comment on this situation, if they've visited the site, if they have feel like they plan to take any action, or what type of investigation they would do, or concerns that they have. we'll invite Mr. Thacker to come first to us.
Is Mr. Dix here, by the way?
Mr. Dix is here, yes.
Okay,
And Mr. Dix, if you would like to speak at some point, we'd invite you to do so, but not required, but you'd be welcome to if you'd like to.
I have some paperwork for everyone on the council too, if I can pass that out, if you'll let me know that.
Sure, okay. Let's hear from these, and then we'll give you a chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council. My name is Clint Thacker, the Director of the Davis County Animal Care and Control for Davis County, Utah. I was able to go out today and inspect Jim Dix's home. Some of those things were said were true, and some of them were just flat out false. We were able to inspect the inside of the garage. There's nothing piled up high to the ceiling. Some of the cages were piled 3 high, and some of the constrictors are big enough that they are high, but nothing to the ceiling. Everything was, from my professional view that I could tell, best of my abilities, everything was healthy, everything was secure, everything looked in a professional manner of one that you could do the best of the abilities there. Was there a lot of animals? Yes, there was. Was there anything out of sorts that I would cause myself to be alarmed besides the number? Absolutely not. There wasn't. Was I concerned for my safety at any one time inside that home? No, I was not. I've known Jim for a long time, going on probably, I've been doing this for 15 years, so a good 14 years I've been associated with Jim Dix through his rescue organization only. He provides hands-on training to animal control officers nationwide and also here in the state. He came to the National Animal Control Association and did trainings on a national level. This is how he's recognized of care for these animals, not only just having them, but how to handle them safely for animal control officers. In fact, Davis County trusts him so much that we have a program set up where if we get one of these animals, we call Jim and we send him right to him. He has the expertise, he has the care to take these animals in, and he holds them for the stray period that is required by law. They're still ours, still belong to Davis County, but he houses them. At that time, after the 5 days period is over, then he gets custody of those animals, and he's able to adopt them out, get them out to different places, release them if possible, those different scenarios. So some of the loopholes or issues we have with the ordinance, when I was looking through this to see what Mr. Dix is violating, too many animals obviously comes to mind. However, he has a certificate of registration or from the Division of Wildlife Resources that it says on there that he can have this many of this type of animal and this many of this type of animal. So that, and also our ordinance states dogs and cats. It does not state amphibians, reptiles. So that was one loophole that's there in the Davis County ordinance. Another one I looked at is nuisance. This is what I was specifically looking for as I walked through Mr. Dix's home, was nuisance. And that includes smell, that includes unsightly, things like that looked really bad. And there was nothing. I was really, in fact, I even took a deep breath when I was inside the room where the turtles were, because I know turtles can be particularly disgusting. And there was no issues at all. The smell issue is totally unfounded. We were inside his garage that read 80 degrees inside his garage from a heater that he has to have. 2 different garages. There was no smell at all in this area. Mr. Dix also provides, going back to the nuisance. There's no noises. I mean, he has turtles in pools in the backyard. There's no noises that would constitute a nuisance animal issue there. So concern was eradicated. Some of the other things that Jim Dix has done throughout the years for Davis County and throughout the state is he goes to fairs, talks to individuals about safe handling. One of the most valuable things is he specifies what is illegal and what is not illegal. How to identify a poisonous snake. And I know that my kids, because Jim Dix has been to Boy Scouts activities and a Cub Scout activity, and showed my kids how to identify a poisonous snake. And because he has these snakes, and he has the Division of Wildlife Certificate of Registration, he can legally own them, which, by the way, they are in a locked room all by themselves in specially designed cages, that my kids are able to recognize a poisonous reptile or poisonous snake. And that's valuable to me as a parent, to be able to do that. As far as questions, I'll be more than happy to field any questions you may have.
Sure, and I would comment that we've appreciated, Mr. Dix, I believe, has come to our Centerville 4th of July before and presented and was very popular with our community. I think the concern is the appropriateness of this in a residential area. Have you had a complaint like this before in Davis County, and how have you handled it in the past?
We have had a complaint before in Davis County like this, and it was when Jim Dix lived in Kaysville. And again, it was just concern that they were going to get out. It was totally unfounded. In the 14 years I've known him, he's never had an incident of one of his getting out. So there was 2 complaints. There was one complaint that there was raccoons in kennels, in regular dog kennels on the side of a fence. Officer showed up, there was nothing inside these kennels. It was, again, an unfounded complaint. Another complaint came through that there was too many animals. And again, that was the loophole that he has a certificate of registration to have these animals. So that also was an unfounded complaint.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Thacker?
Yeah, I've got one. When you transfer animals to Mr. Dick's care, does the county pay any fees for that, or
No.
boarding or anything? It's all gratis.
What do you define as grass?
Gratis. Do you?
Gratis.
Do you actually?
I thought you said grass, and
It's
I'm
all
like,
grass. Yeah. No. So
that's a different kind of payment.
The county does not transfer any funds to Mr. Dick's for housing these animals in any way, shape, or form.
The only time I have ever exchanged money with Mr. Dix was when he did a presentation for a Cub Scout. I donated money to him.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
If there are no other questions, we'll ask our friends from the DWR if they have any comment or can give us any advice on this.
My name's White Bubach, Sergeant for Davis-Weber County with the Division of Wildlife. I don't know if I have too much I can offer on top of what Clint says besides kind of give a description what a COR is and how it's obtained. Excuse me. COR stands for Certificate of Registration. There's an application process that an applicant has to go through in order to possess essentially protected wildlife. There's non-controlled wildlife, which some reptiles are, that you don't need to have a permit for. Things like reptiles I stated, but domestically born or bred and raised fox are another thing you don't have to have a certificate of registration for. So there are a number of animals you can possess without a certificate of registration, some of which I would assume is you possess, which obviously isn't an issue. Once that's issued to him, Mr. Dix's COR is pretty lengthy because of the skills and the education services that he offers. I've never personally dealt with Mr. Dix, so I don't have as much history as Clint does with him. But definitely the most lengthy COR I have that states how many of what animals he can have and the restrictions on those animals. It does mention venomous reptiles have to be in a certain locked cage, and you can't breed these or anything of that nature. So as for a COR, that's essentially how it works. He submits an application, we review it, and either approve or deny or make a recommendation for that.
Is there any kind of process to after you get the COR at one time that you check and say, okay, somebody's in compliance or out of compliance?
Sure, we can do an inspection at any reasonable time of any facility where these CORs are effective for. So if it says he can or cannot have animals at a given address, that should be stated on the COR. If he has a controlled species that isn't on a COR, then obviously that's something we can determine through a compliance check.
And any comment on it? Is it normal to house these animals in a residential zone or more commonly in a commercial or industrial zone, or?
So it all depends. I mean, we give CORs for fallow deer, which have certain restrictions, fence sizes, square footage of property on which they can be contained, things of that nature. So it is very individual based. A quick glance through his COR, I didn't read it all, but it didn't have any restrictions on where or whatever these needed to be kept that I read.
So you don't, when you're giving these permits, you don't look at where the things are going to be. So he has this permit, he can be in Centerville, he could be in Kaysville, he could be in Salt Lake, he can move them wherever he wants. You don't regulate the site, or if it's in a neighborhood or not in a neighborhood, you just give him the
No, ma'am.
certificate?
Yeah, and for the reason for that is these CORs are issued in compliance with state code, which have no dealings with city ordinances. So we're not going to do the research to, and I don't issue them, so I may be misspeaking, but I'm pretty confident we're not going to do the research into the city where this individual is living to see if it's in compliance with that city. That would be up to the individual to ensure that he's within compliance. If they move, they're required to notify us of that move so we can update that in our records. But no, we're not going to look at, as far as I am aware, and again, I don't issue these personally, but city ordinance don't play any role that I'm aware of in the issuance of a COR.
Are there many of these type of CORs issued? I mean, is Mr. Dix unique, or is there a lot of them around the state?
Mr. Dix is unique in the extent of his COR, but the fact that he has a COR is not unique.
Can you give me some examples of mammals that would fall under this category?
Fallow deer is really common.
What is it?
A fallow deer is kind of like an exotic deer. It's kind of looks like a reindeer. Reindeer would be another example. Elk could be another example. But those would be mammals. Raccoons, wild foxes, things of that nature.
Okay, so there are certain mammals that people can keep with this COR, but you do have certain specifications or restrictions as far as...
For certain mammals, yeah. For like the fallow deer, I think they have to be within, have to have like an 8-foot fence or something so they don't escape, and if they escape, then they're property of the state and things of that nature. But to my knowledge, I don't think for fox or anything of that nature, we're gonna have strict housing conditions outside of safe and humane.
So are you implying from what you're saying that if I wanted to keep a fox, you don't really care?
If it's domestically bred and raised, we wouldn't have any authority over that because it's essentially a dog. Now, if you have a wild fox, whether it's a rehab or something of that nature, you'd need a COR for that.
And the COR, is that, I'm trying to glean from what's been said. Does Mr.
It's
Dix
not
have, does he
straightforward.
have one? Does he have
Yes.
15, one for each species?
He has, as far as I'm understanding, he has one that is a rather, and I can show you kind of an example of what it looks like. It's a sheet of paper that describes what he's allowed to possess, and obviously it's a lengthy sheet of paper.
And so are there any limitations on the number of animals, or is it just he can have as many as he wants?
We're going to take into account what that person's capable of maintaining. If he doesn't have the facilities or the knowledge to maintain, say, a venomous snake, then we may not issue that COR. But as for that portion, I don't know if I should necessarily speak to that because I don't take that into consideration. My job's to make sure that when we have an issue that they fall within compliance with their COR. But I am familiar with the operation on how they're obtained. But as for the specifics, and maybe if Mr. Dix gets up here and talks, he can maybe offer a little insight since he's been so involved in this on restrictions per certain species. But I would assume that his is so lengthy because he does have that specialized knowledge.
Thank you very much. If there are not any other questions, then we'll invite Mr. Dix if he would like to share any information with us or comment on his plans. Well, we're not having necessarily a public hearing on this, so I think our attorney would give us the the evil eye on that, but we'd love to have your opinion afterwards, if you'd be willing to share that.
I lived next door to you for 10 years with this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need one set? Do you need to keep one set?
No.
My name's James Dix, and I just want to give you a little bit of background about the reptile rescue. I started this in 1998. I have 43 years experience in handling wild and dangerous and venomous reptiles. I've never taken a bite from a venomous snake, and I handle them all the time. As Clint was saying, I do law enforcement, training, drug raid impounds, illegally owned, transported, possessed, at large, fire rescue, orphaned, and abused. So I cover a wide area. A lot of the agencies that I work with are anyone from SWAT, DEA, ATF, to like the Clearfield fire, which this lady was talking about, and that we went in and removed a 4-foot snake. It was a gaboon viper from Africa, 3-inch fangs. You can die in about an hour from a bite from that. I do this all as a community service. I put my life on the line. I do not get paid for dealing with venomous or the wild and dangerous. If I got bit by that gaboon viper, anti-venin is not in the state of Utah for African species. It would take 4 hours away from Dade County, Florida, unless we had a zoo in a neighboring state that would be willing to give up their anti-venin for that. And it's about $90,000 starting without hospital bills. That's just for your first dose. So I provide a service statewide and sometimes out of state. In the educational field, we use these animals. They are tools of our trade for exhibits, education, even at fairs. I do a lot of troubled youth groups. I deal with kids, like we just did One and up here in Ogden, and we'll be doing Decker Lake, and we'll be doing Wasatch Youth, and we do the Genesis program sometimes too. And we teach the kids a hobby. Instead of going home and smoking crack and shooting heroin, they learn about reptiles. We even do field trips. If you look on the first page on that, I even do training at the Mormon Vault. We go up there, they have den sites with rattlesnakes, and these rattlesnakes go underneath the car tires for 50 employees that park there. And so we go up there and show them the safe way of removing them, handling them, where to let them loose so nobody gets bit or injured. And like Clint said, I've never had an escapee. I have all my fingers and none of them are messed up. So I'm very good at what I do, probably one of the top people in the state. Now, dealing with DWR on the limits of animals and that, certain things we have to have multiple, because if we're doing a couple of events, we have to have more than one animal, for the reason that if we have 3 shows going on at the same time or educational things, we can't have one gator sitting at a park all day long for 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. when we need it at another location. Also, the animal gets stressed out. We have to take in consideration animal abuse or neglect. If we stress an animal out too much, we have to have one that we can change out so we still have that animal on display. So these are things that a lot of people don't think about, and they're like, you know, you have a lot of animals. Well, it takes a lot of animals. I also do stuff for the movie industry. I guess everybody here is LDS. If you've seen Ephraim's Rescue, that rattlesnake on his chest is one of mine. 17 Miracles, all the live snakes in that were mine. Bible Stories, I did that also, and Sting of the Scorpion in Jericho. And so these animals are used also for education in that field, and it also helps promote Utah for the movie industry. So everything that I've dealt with since I was 12 years old, I have a lot of experience, and I don't put anybody in harm's way. I do training with animal control officers, different agencies. If you need us to go out and there's a problem, nobody has a place to house a 15-foot snake, where do you send it? The zoo doesn't take it. We rescue from the zoo. So it would come to us, and we would keep it until we either find a home for it, or if we could utilize it in training, educational, then we will keep that animal. So we're not trying to make anybody feel uncomfortable. If it was an unsafe thing, I sure as heck wouldn't be sleeping 10 feet away from a venomous room. And that's how I lived in West Valley for over 18 years. And I had all these animals in my home. Back then I had 500, and I had my mammals there too. Now, talking about mammals, my wolves, my coyotes, they're trained like dogs. They'll roll over and kiss you, lick your face. My foxes are the same way. So a lot of people think that when you hear something like a coyote that it's just going to tear you up. This is not true. If you work with this animal, you can train them, and they can be as gentle as a baby. And so even at the location I'm at now, all these animals are in secured cages. There's $65,000 in cages there. It's not some $3 piece of junk glass container. The rattlesnakes are in locked tanks that have padlocks on them, and they're in a secured room, and that's how I've dealt with it when I lived in West Valley, and I never had any issues anywhere else I've lived. And so I'm an expert in this field. That's why I have these. They don't just give you a license, and when you go in and apply for a COR, you have to prove yourself.
Thank you. You're obviously an experienced professional and know a lot about this. What are your plans? Do you plan to continue this out of your present location?
Currently, right now, yes. We are in the process of trying to get the West Valley shelter that's been vacant 5 years, and we're having petitions signed to move forward to the council and see if it's possible. We would like to make that an educational center, or any other city that would be willing to work with us, that would be willing to help us with a building and stuff like that. Certain cities will put certain taxes on like fast food and stuff like that, and they help out the zoos and stuff like that with that, and we would like to get involved in something like that. Our education for scouts and troubled youth is very important, and as you can see on those papers when you get time to read, these are all people that think very highly of us for what we do, and a lot of people say that we are overlooked and that the state should actually give us a building so we can make something that would work for everybody.
I do have a question for you, Mr. Dix.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, you mentioned 65,000 in cages. You've got some expenses. How are you covering these expenses? Are you, for these movies, are you taking in cash donations? Are you operating a nonprofit? What's the mechanism by which
We
you take care of
are
these?
working on a nonprofit status.
Okay.
Because we can benefit more that way, and so we are. But it takes like a year to get that. It's not something that happens overnight. And I'm a plumber by trade. That's what I do for a living.
So when you take in a donation or one of these movies, I'm assuming you charge, or they pay you some fee.
Right.
What mechanism are you taking that in? Are you operating as a sole proprietor? What legal entity is taking
It would
funds?
be a donation for sole proprietor, because the money is used to save the animals, and that's all it's used for.
Okay.
I assume that you breed rodents to be able to feed the
We usually
reptiles.
buy them. When I had my place in West Valley, I used to breed them there, but we wouldn't be able to do that at this location because the breeding racks are 8 feet long and 6 feet tall, and there's like 32 bins in each one, and we at full capacity, but we had 500 animals there, you gotta remember. So at that time, we could breed approximately 1,000 rats a month. So right now, we don't need that many. So we get people that do donate rodents. I have friends that donate rodents and rabbits. And so what we don't get donated, then we have to supplement and buy.
So you're not breeding any rodents at this
No.
location?
Mr. Dix, I think you've made it clear, and there's that you're professional and you provide a very valuable service. I think the concern from this council and from our staff is this the appropriate location for that type of service, or is there a more appropriate location than?
Well, I'm not planning on making it a permanent thing there, if that's what you're asking, because I do need some more space in that. And so that's just, until I can find what I need that will work. And so it's not going to be, a permanent resident for the animals to currently be there for years on end. That's not what I'm looking for. If I can get the West Valley shelter, then we'll move instantly over in there to start working on them, start thinning the animals over there.
Would you
And
take them all there?
Yeah, pretty much, in that, because it's nice to have them all at one location.
So,
And- what's that?
so you indicated you had 500, you have,
That was 5 years ago, in that. So that's when I had a 5-bedroom home and like a quarter acre, and then it was all set up, and these are my neighbors. We never had any problem with anyone in the neighborhood. The kids would like to come over, see the animals and stuff like that. Totally safe. If it wasn't, we wouldn't let them come over and walk inside and look at them and so forth. And then,
so how many animals do you turn over in a year?
it depends. This year's been a slow year for stuff coming in, which is good because we need a break. So most of our animals we adopt out twice a year. We don't run ads on KSL because a lot of people, you go out and you meet them, and they're like, can you hold the animal? I don't get paid for 2 weeks. And those people, usually if they can't afford to adopt an animal for a price of $20, which is nothing, because 2 days we're already in the animal, so we're losing money between heat and food. They can't afford to buy a $200 cage for it and give it a good life. So we have to consider that. So when we do adopt out, our MIG adoptions are twice a year at the Reptile Expo at the Salt Lake Fairgrounds on North Temple. And you have serious people coming there and people that have the knowledge and know how to take care of these animals. So we actually get a better clientele to take possession of these animals.
If you have them in your garage in the summer when it gets so hot, will you have to leave your garage open? I mean, what
No,
do
we
you-
would have fans going. The house is air conditioned, so the part of the garage is attached to the house. You just open the door in the kitchen, and the air conditioning can go out there. But we have high velocity fans that move air very quickly and very powerfully, and that usually works for it.
Mayor?
Yes,
For the record, just to clarify, some numbers have been mentioned, several different numbers. How many approximately do you have at this location?
I'm guessing approximately probably 250, somewhere, maybe a little less. And that, a lot of these are frogs and stuff, you have to remember. I mean, we have probably 30 frogs. We have 80 water turtles in one tank, and we have like another 30 split up in 4 other tanks. And then, we have some, I don't know where they came up with these numbers of, 500 lizards. We have something like 15 geckos and like 12 monitors. And that's all the lizards that we possess that are there.
How many poisonous? How many of them are poisonous?
None of the, there's one lizard that's a Gila monster, and that is nothing that if you get bit, you do not die from that. It's just very excruciating. They don't even have an anti-venin they give you. It's just very painful. You have to ride it out. The rattlesnakes, I don't know, just right offhand, that's what my COR has. I think it's like 12, something like that.
How many cages would you say you have? Considering shared cages, what's your total number?
With animals in them?
Mhm.
Well, we don't usually double them up, except like in the frogs and stuff like that, because most of the snakes are separated, because when we use them in a show, we don't want to have to be pulling them out, 5 different snakes, and that's easier to just take the one cage and walk out. Shared cages, I think there's maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. Right now we got water turtles, some of them that are temperature controlled. They can't go outside until it's warmer. 5, 6, 7, I'm going to say maybe 10. And
So taking that into consideration and your total number of animals, how many individual cages do you have that are containing animals right now, would you guess?
probably like 240.
Okay.
Are
So-
the,
Oh, go ahead. Or that side.
are the frogs food?
No, they're frogs, depending upon, like some of them are Colorado river toads, and we use them in canine training because it can actually kill a dog. It's just like when we use the rattlesnakes to rattlesnake safe a dog, like Tooele County, we do search and rescue dogs, cadaver dogs, so they don't pull their owners into an area when they're looking for a missing person or a body and get bit by snakes. So we use these animals in training like that. And these toads, if you are a dog and you eat it or put it in your mouth, it can kill a dog. And so this is something that we have to use for those classes. The rest of them are pet store toads that you can buy and stuff like that. And so all toads are toxic, even our native ones, but they're not something that would kill a human. What happens if you rub your eyes swell up and that. And if you put it in your mouth, then you can, get sick, but it wouldn't be anything that would be a fatality.
This is certainly a very interesting topic, not one that we've had before. There is no necessarily decision for the council to make on this, but to become more educated on this. My personal opinion is you provide a valuable service, but this is not the right location to provide that service.
Correct.
And I believe
Or
our...
if there's anything we can do to help him get this West Valley property.
If you could, please.
No, I seriously, I wonder. You do have certain connections in West Valley.
Yeah, you do.
I do. I will call the mayor and...
Do you know what they're using it for?
Imagine.
Storing recycled garbage cans. And that's all it's being used for.
We'll swap them. We'll take the garbage cans. And they can have the snakes. How's
Tell
that?
them we'd be more than happy to get some people working on the building and make something that would be nice for the whole community. And that. I would like to make a comment about that pest control truck. My girlfriend Johnette signed a year pest lease where I'm gonna come out and spray for ants and spiders, and that's why they were there and 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, and that was their last time of coming out, because we can't have them spraying. It would poison animals and stuff, like turtles trying to eat the lawn and stuff like that in the summer. So that's the reason why that was there. And Clint verified we don't have any big mammals in the backyard, anything like that. And I also heard from Lisa, your attorney, that somebody said I was throwing live chickens into my gators. We actually buy store chicken that's cut up that humans eat, and it's frozen, and that's what we feed them. So I just like to set that record straight on that.
Thank you.
Mayor, I do have a question for Corey, our Community Development Director.
Okay.
Before Corey comes up, can I just make one comment, Mr. Dix? One of the things I did notice, and when you're facing us and you're talking to us about the African snake and the cost of the anti-venom and the fact that it's not stocked here in Utah, I could see a visible reaction from your neighbors who were concerned about having something that lethal in their neighborhood. I mean, just looking out, I could see a visible reaction.
We don't possess any exotic.
So when you
venomous?
collect something like that, I just want to get a clarification. So if you went on a rescue like that and it was something that is in that exotic category, what do you do with that animal?
We communicate with DWR, and we have people that take them in Florida, Texas, and different states. We do not keep those because there's no anti-venin in the state for that.
Okay.
So would you have brought it home that night?
What's that?
Would you have brought it, you said you went and got that snake.
Yeah, we took it to
Okay.
Yeah, it went to the Lee K shooting range. They actually built a thing over there now to put those exotics when we encounter that and whatever it is in situation. The snakes that we possess, the anti-venin here is crowfab, and that's produced at Research Park, and so they do not pose any threat for the anti-venin not being available.
Thank you. That was helpful because that was a clarification that I'm glad you made. Thank you.
And just to clarify, I wouldn't let him take it in my house.
A quick question for Corey.
Yeah. So we obviously have a very unique and quite complicated situation here, but it has exposed what seems to me a hole in our land use ordinance.
I don't think it's a hole in your land use ordinance. I think it's an animal control, and then the land use ordinance simply can support it.
Right, so, but considering the fact that we do measure and limit number of residents, human residents per square feet, we control for dogs and cats, we control for
The
number
county
of
ordinance controls dogs and cats. The city
chicken
doesn't.
and rabbits, we consider if something's an agricultural animal and requires a certain number of space. So it seems, my inclination is to make a motion to send this to the Planning Commission for study as to whether it would be worth.
I think you have broader policies to look at than this land use.
Okay.
Now, the land use can be supportive to you, but to start going into the issues of we do the farm animals because you just have space needs adjacent to residential, so you have a point system.
Mm-hmm.
We do the chickens and regulate numbers because we just introduced the farm animals back into the residential area because that was a trend that people like. I don't think you should be looking at your zoning ordinance as the controlling factor to talk about household pets. When you're talking about the loophole is the county ordinance. You've adopted a rural ordinance, if you will, and matched it for municipal purposes. The first place you should be looking is at the animal control ordinance, and do you want to go above and beyond what you have adopted to the county and negotiate that management with the county. If you go back down to the household variety, because that's where your danger is, if you will, it's secure from testimony, but from the public worry, the danger is with the DWR issue. When you separate out that and handle that under the county animal control ordinance and DWR and see what you can regulate on a local level, after you've accomplished that, now you're just talking about the number of frogs I can keep. And I think you tread in a place that's difficult because you're starting to regulate behavior rather than land use. You're starting to regulate hobbies. What kind of hobbies can people have? And how intense that hobby is going to be. And if you're talking about household variety pets, how many aquariums can you have? Reptiles are scary, snakes are scary, but how many goldfish can you have? And stuff like that. So I think the zoning ordinance can be a supportive document, but your primary place is your animal control.
So Corey, relative to that same question, land use, wouldn't you consider that there would be some sort of threshold where you enter into commercial operations because you've got extra burden on the sewer system, you've got all these tanks, all this waste disposal? Where do you draw that distinction?
It's hard when you get into the hobbies area. Yes, you can do that. You can start saying this type of use generates this kind of waste, or this type of use generates this, and you can look at it, your infrastructure. But that's a very different clause than the issue of I'm doing it in my home. The hobby activity is, I think, is in almost every city is a very broad category because you are now starting to regulate behavior. And zoning ordinances get really tricky in regulating people's behavior and supporting them in the court. And so I think you could put a cap, but if you put a cap, it's hard to say, okay, our justification of our land use is 10 snakes, our justification of land use is 1,000 goldfish. Applying numbers to the hobby activity and pets and the behavior becomes very problematic.
But my wife would have 5 cats if the city ordinance allowed for it, so.
The county ordinance regulates the cats, and you can have, what is it, the maximum of 6 animals, but then the stray issue of the no-kill, you'll actually see colonies of cats. We have a colony here in Centerville of 25 under the no-kill parameters of the county ordinance. And so they were a conglomerate of cats. The county came in, captured them, spayed and neutered, and then brought them back out as part of their no-kill procedures.
So to clarify, your suggestion is that we need to deal with it on a municipal ordinance level first, and then once we've decided what approach we want to take, it might go back down to you.
Yeah, the issue is if there's something that you've done in the municipal ordinance and animal control that can be supportive to that ordinance with the land use, so it's easier to communicate it, we certainly can do that. But I just don't think your land use is your primary control.
We do have an ordinance that does prohibit poisonous reptiles, though, right?
No, you do not. What you have is you have 2 sets of ordinance. The first one is your land use. Your land use says that you can have pets, no numbers to it, provided that they're not likely to cause harm. So that's the clause. And so when you look at it, we have now an animal control ordinance that says as long as you have a DWR permit, then the conclusion is they're not likely to cause harm because the wild animal and the DWR permits is under the county adopted ordinance, not zoning.
So in that case, you're suggesting we lobby our friends at the county to change their ordinance?
I think your primary spot is to look at your county ordinance, see where you want to change that, and what kind of parameters you want to add as a municipality in addition to the adopted county ordinance. But remember, the animal control maintenance is handled by the county through agreement, and so you'd have to negotiate whether they have the capacity to match your demands and what the procedures and charges would be for that service.
And in addition, wouldn't, Mr. Dix is already grandfathered in. Anything we do now is moving forward, correct?
Generally, and this is a legal question, from a zoning perspective, they're not retroactive, and I think that generally terms with any law, retroactive application of law is a very tricky place.
So Lisa, it sounds like regardless of the direction we go, or, you know, future investigation, it sounds like since there's an exchange of cash for services provided, that there's some sort of business license or something of that nature that would be required, or is this, how does that work out? Because that's why I was going down that line, both with the county and with Mr. Dix, was to determine what sort of licensing does the city require for that, or anything of that nature.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, I mean, we haven't looked into that as staff. I'm just saying that does seem like something, is he conducting a business? We'd have to analyze that.
Yeah, and the issue is if there is a license issued, because it's required to have a license, state law is a reciprocal issue. If he's licensed in another jurisdiction, like you're a contractor doing, and you're licensed out of that jurisdiction, you don't have to get a second license to do work inside a jurisdiction. So business will be a complicated matter to assure where they sit. Do they have to be licensed? If they're licensed.
But the difference, I think, would be is that the residence is in Centerville, so that is the point of business, not necessarily professional licensing.
That's where it gets really sticky, is
okay.
where the point of business and what's being conducted and what evidence that that's being done that
yeah.
way.
I went from Tooele County, so that's where I go statewide, and this covers me anywhere I'm at. Just so you guys
To
know.
conduct and accept money. The issue now is where is the business being conducted and what type. If a contractor's coming into your home, he's conducting business.
Right.
But it doesn't violate. So the business license may make an enforcement happen, but it may not necessarily result in
Well, don't get me wrong, I'm not looking for an enforcement, I'm just trying to see where we sit on even par. Is that, you know, take for example, Mr. Dix is a plumber. If he stockpiles materials at his home, is he operating a business out of his home, or is he, you know, is that, see, it gets really sticky, and that's what
I agree with you, and it's just something that we have to parse through and say, okay, what's happening, what is he licensed, where it's conducted, is it reciprocal, is it not?
That's why I wanted to make it Lisa's problem.
Yeah. So given we've spent a good amount of time on this, we've all become much better educated. I guess I would say to Mr. Dix, it's a valuable service. We will continue to pursue this, the complaints, and look at the options from a city perspective. We commit that to the neighbors that this is not the last. I will also personally commit to you that I will call Mayor Bigelow of West Valley City and their city manager
thank you.
and encourage them to see if they can help you.
Yeah, it's just going to waste in that. I would like to make one comment. If you guys are going to try to do reptile laws, feel free to call me. I would be more than happy. What you would need on something like that to make people feel happy is you would need an exotic animal for reptiles. Under exotic, which would cover any big snake, okay? And then you would, which would also classify as a wild and dangerous. It would be the same thing. And you would have a permit. Usually it's like $25 for something like that for a year. If you want to put stipulations on the amount, that's up to you. Second would be reptiles are considered cold-blooded, and household pets, and this is how the laws used to read, and I haven't heard it changing, is a warm animal that returns love and affection, and snakes don't do that. So you would have to make sure that you would classify it as domestic snakes on a separate thing, which would be anything from a pet store, and then exotic would be separate, and then your venomous reptiles, like she was talking about, it is illegal for anybody to possess venomous unless they have a COR in the zoo. Myself and Shane Richards are the only 3 people in the whole state that possess that. So if somebody did move in and had venomous, they would be in violation. DWR would seize the animals and they would be cited. I think it's like a $1,900 fine, something like that, Class B misdemeanor. So just a couple things in case you didn't know, okay?
Thank you.
So the one up that you got up in Clearfield, the whatever it was,
The house fire, yes.
Where did that come from?
The Gaboon Viper, the man bought it and had it shipped in through the airport illegally, bought it as a baby and raised it up. He had 5 rattlesnakes also that we pulled out of there. You can buy, I've removed cobras out of here up in the avenues, Gaboon Vipers, all-scaled vipers, lots of rattlesnakes and that. So you can bring about anything you want and ship it in, but it is illegal and there are fines, and if somebody finds out, then, you know, they turn you in and that. So, and a lot of the people in the Herp Society that deal with snakes, police each other to make sure that nobody's breaking the law. And if they do hear through the grapevine, they usually call and turn them in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dix. We appreciate your time. We appreciate
Mayor.
the DWR, Mr. Thacker, and those residents who've helped bring this to our attention. And we will continue to investigate and work on this matter. Thank you for the respectful way in which you had this dialogue tonight. It's not. So if we open it up, we're going to be here all night. So we're going to move on to the next item. You're welcome to continue the discussion in the hall if anyone would like to. The next item on our discussion tonight is a request from Bruce Pitt regarding the South Main Street corridor. Many of you are well aware that we had significant discussions in the past year, and a year ago, or less than a year ago, we had a proposal from a developer to develop the property where we had a Pioneer Growers Nursery with the O'Brien Glass property. That application is, my understanding, has been withdrawn. We do not have another application for this property at this time. There is no application pending. There is no decision for the City Council or the Planning Commission to make. Mr. Pitt has requested time to speak to the City Council and explain a concept that he has, to ask the City Council if they're interested in considering this. If they are, then we will go through a process of studying it, and there would be lots of opportunity for public comment and for discussion. But tonight is not necessarily that opportunity. The opportunity is just for Mr. Pitt to speak to the council about the concept, and then the council can decide if they want to react to that or not. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Pitt to speak to us.
Thank you. Bruce Pitt, reside at 252 East Ricks Creek Circle. My desire to be here tonight is to invite the City Council, other city officials, and you who are interested to do two things: to contemplate whether or not a assisted living project, particularly on South Main Street in our area, is something that would bring value and be of substance for this community. And then the second would be to investigate sufficiently that we can have an exchange and visit about it without bringing up the contention that seems to always be about South Main Street corridor. I think the best way that I can go about that is to share a little bit of history. I was born and raised in Bountiful, but worked in Centerville all my life and fell in love with it. And so as we finished up dental school, I came here, and with our family, we set up a dental practice, and secured a livelihood for our family. We ended up with 11 children. 8 of them yearned to be in Centerville. We are a family that loves Centerville, and they are here with us doing good things. I've been involved with the South Main Street corridor for quite a while because we have property there, practice there, and then the property. And so it's been of an interest. But as Brighton Homes came, Nate came, making a proposal to our family that he would like to buy our property along with O'Brien's, and to there put a mixed-use, high-density apartment complexes. I pulled together the family, for the children own the property now. It's the Pitt Family Limited Partnership that owns it, and asked them what they would want done with that. And they indicated that it was time, it was an investment, and they could use that experience, that money now. And to the person, 11 of them said they would like now to move ahead and sell that property. I feel very strongly about some things in Centerville, and one of them was high density. And so I couldn't feel comfortable in coming and being a part of that because I didn't want to pit myself against my children. And so I was absent during a proposal or two. And as Nate came and made various proposals and approaches, they didn't feel comfortable with what I felt I could sustain and represent, though the children own the property, and so we went ahead as being a part of that. As that kind of disintegrated and fell apart, a couple of companies came to us wanting to know if we could step in on that property and put an assisted living project there. And so I began to contemplate, and I would ask you to do that also. What would be the value of an assisted living center in Centerville? I know that density was an issue, and that causes traffic and causes crime, so many believe. And so in assisted living, as I contemplated, it was something that there's not a lot of crime out of an assisted living project. And because most of the visiting to assisted living projects come on weekends, and that it's just very sporadic, we wouldn't bring with an assisted living project a lot of the traffic that was always a part of the concern of that. I began to see, as I contemplated it, that it might be then an opportunity for this city to have a great service experience, because young people can come from our elementary schools, our junior highs, and our high schools, can entertain and perform for these people who are there in that center. They can come to love the older people of our community. And I thought, that sounds good. And so there were a lot of things that seemed really good about it as I contemplated it. And so I felt like I could now get behind an effort to look at and see if an assisted living project, assisted living community would be right for Centerville City, particularly at that location. It seemed to resolve a lot of issues. I know there's some concern about our parking from our dental practice overflowing. Bringing that up with the company or the group that was asking that we might sell to them, which is the Dunn family and a Larson family. The Larson family is prominent here in Centerville, Bruce and Wayne Larson, and the Dunn family. And so they said, well, sure, let's maybe, if structure permits, and let's put parking underneath the ground so that we could have more green space, and then you could overflow into that with your parking. So there wouldn't be a lot of parking on the streets. It would be underground. If that were allowed, it would open up a lot of green space. So that seemed really, really good. And so I began to think through a lot of things, and in the midst of that, began to talk to people. And as we were talking one time, a man came up and he said, so you're talking about the use of that property, why don't we put an assisted living community there? I've been looking for someone, or for somewheres to put my family, my mother, and I would love to have it in Centerville, where I could drop by after work and give her support and strength. And so it seemed like a lot of good things were coming out of this. But I had to feel really good about it if I was going to come before you and ask you to contemplate it and investigate it. So I went to a number of assisted living centers. The one I was particularly impressed with was one in Brigham City, where the Larson and the Dunn family had created it. I went into it, and it wasn't as large and overwhelming as I thought it might be. It was very well put together structurally and with a lot of green space. And that was impressive. And as I went into it, I began to have some feelings that were important. I saw some end-of-life experiences going on in people that felt good about themselves. Their goal is to have each one within that center and that community feel better about themselves each day. It's not a place to come and die, but it's a place to come and build lives of these people who are at end-of-life experiences. One man, as we were walking along, pulled Brother Mr. Dunn down and said, have you secured that property in Idaho? He said, my brother is up there, he hates life, and I tell him how marvelous it is to be here, how much I enjoy it. I've called a realtor, he's found you a piece of property. Will you build a facility like this up in Wyoming? I saw people who really enjoyed life And one of the men pulled me aside and said, "You know what we did? They took us fishing, one of these ponds where you pay to catch fish." And he said, I love to fish, to think I could still do that and have that experience. And I began to see that an experience like that could be had for many people who desperately want a place like that. I have 11 children. I hope they would take care of me till I die. But if Alzheimer's sets in or dementia sets in, I don't want to be that kind of a burden. And so in this kind of a facility, they would still come by, I would hope, but it would be very convenient. And we have like 6 grandchildren at Centerville Junior. I would hope that 1 or 2 a week would come by and see Grandpa or Grandma that might be there. There are people who love Centerville. They love it, and they want to stay here. They want to die here. And they want to have their associations with their family here. And all of those things began to come together to me. And so I wanted to come and present to you as the city council and as other representatives of the city, and particularly to you who are concerned. Can we contemplate this as a possibility? Can we go up to this facility that is in Brigham City and actually go inside, see it from the outside so we can experience it, feel the feeling that's in there, and then see if this is not a good thing for this community to have? I think until we do, we will be presenting things, and then opinions will be expressed and contention will surface. And so maybe this is an awkward way to come about it, but it's the only way I could do it, because that's who I am. I don't like contention. And so if we can go up, and Clint, wherever he is, he left, he gave us an insight because he went into the home that only into the home could be giving him. And so if we could go visit the facility, if we could visit one with another, and I would love to have a visit with any of the community about anything that they're concerned about. And then if we can try and resolve many of those issues, then we can bring it back to the city council, if you've been there and have your feelings, without the kinds of contention that South Main Street corridor have always presented. I don't like that. I don't want to be a part of that. And so I don't know whether this is protocol. I asked our attorney, so is this protocol? She says, no, you present, we decide. And I said, no, let us come together. Let us reason together. Let us visit so that we can feel and understand, and let us be able to project in a spot what is there, the good that it could be for this community, and then let's talk about it. Let's resolve issues we can, and then let's come and present it after we have the foundation done. I was appreciative of the process tonight because I learned a lot, and I appreciate the council wanting to know and to inquire. I would hope that we might do that in this project also. And so, again, my hope is that you'll contemplate whether this is a good fit for the city. And number 2, I hope that you'll take opportunity to investigate and to go into a facility and see what it's like and understand it. Understand that I was there on Halloween, and those older people loved the kids coming through. And the kids were doing something good. And I saw on the wall a picture of a person, because they have each one of them is in there when they were in their prime, with all of their accomplishments around them. And I saw them doing more than playing bingo and dying. I saw them growing and developing talents. And I said to myself, this is something good. It's something that could unify us. It's something that could be a service experience for us. It's something that wouldn't be a traffic congestion, wouldn't be a crime issue. It can be very beautifully done with a lot of green space. And we can work through many of the issues that might surface with neighbors. But let's do that before we come and contend one against another. And so that's, again, my reason for being here tonight, to invite you to ponder, but also to investigate. And the people up in Brigham City would love to treat you to dinner, but you'll have to sit by one of those good people and get to know them. And we'll feed you well. You can see the facility. vision how it would fit on this project, and then use the contemplation that's going on. Think about what would happen to you when you become of that age. Maybe I'm the oldest in the whole, well, I'm not the oldest here, close, but we begin to think differently. And so I think it's something that Centerville could be very proud of, and something that Centerville could use to bless the lives of people. So that's my request, and we don't have a lot of drawings. Sister Jennifer back there says, I want a PowerPoint. And I said, that's not Bruce Pitt. He's come to express himself today. And so I will receive any questions or any thoughts you might have.
Any questions?
I received several emails from people that would like to know approximately how many beds you're thinking about, the size of the building you're thinking about.
I would like very much for you to go visit, Robin, and see the facility. If I were to say 60 beds, for some that might be tremendously large. But when you see 60 beds in the context of a facility, and these are more communities where someone interested in one thing can come to know someone else who's interested in a like matter. And so a number is important if we can create it in such a way that it's beautiful and serviceable. And so rather than say we're coming to present to that, let's let you put your input, as well as all of you put your input, after you've been there and seen how it reacts and acts in that given setting. So we haven't got a structure to show you. We don't have a drawing. We don't have a floor plan. We have a concept. And we're hoping that we can bring that forward, that we can contemplate it, that we can investigate it and assess it, and then talk it through.
I think the only concern that I have, and it's one I've always had with politicians from the beginning of time, and I vowed never to do it, was to give the appearance that I'm giving special access to an interested party who's going to make money. That's not in any way to cast aspersions on your proposal. Mm-hmm. But anytime you take an elected body and you separate them from the public, like take us out of this forum into another place, it gives the sense of impropriety to it. That's always been my concern. We showed up as 3 members, we'd have to declare it a public meeting, which means that any member of the public who wanted to be there at that point would have to be allowed to be there. So, conceptually, I have no objection to the concept of an assisted living facility. What I don't understand, and this is where concept has to come into some sort of concrete, is what is the footprint going to look like? What is the proposal? Because then it allows me in a public forum to voice concerns or ask questions. That would be my primary concern with the field trip, is I do not ever want to give that impression to anyone who voted or didn't vote for me or any of the other elected officials that there's special access.
Do we have the capability, and I appreciate that so much, do we have the capability of sending planning and zoning, or do you have the capability of sending a body that represents a neutral situation to look and share with you?
We do, and it's not uncommon for the city council to do field trips. People have expressed concern before, and it would be, if more than 3 went, it would be noticed as a public meeting that the city council is going there and noticed that way. Usually not many people come when we do a field trip to the sewer plant or to the rifle range, but it would be noticed. We have the ability to send staff, or people can go on their own. I think the concept of studying and getting more educated, in my mind, is a value to make an educated decision.
This is an area of concern. How many times have we spent hours and hours here dealing with it? South Main Street corridor, and the hurt that has come out of many of that, the frustrations that have come out. I hope that we could bypass that in some way, and the only thought I had is to be realistic in looking at it from that close, up personal way, and then we're able to make some good, wise decisions. Now, whether that's through you or whether that's through someone you allocate to do that.
Another option might be, depending on whether we could all agree to go or not agree to go, would be if we could get someone to do a video of the building, at least then everyone would have a feel, whether we go or not, if there was a video of the building, the inside, you going through and letting them see so that they had an idea of what it is you're planning. You know what I'm saying? Something we could present to everyone, because obviously everyone's not going to go up there with us. But if we
The
could get-
invitation would be to as many as who want to. But yes, that could be done. I would share with you, though, there's a difference in a video and a difference in visiting with someone.
Correct.
And there's a feeling that's different. And so I contemplated it, but I didn't get sold on it till I investigated it. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I'll bear witness to you that this is something that Centerville could enjoy, we could be proud of, it would be a service to our people, and something that I think would bring a legacy to our little community. And I promise you it could be run right. Whether you can get that feel through video, Robert, I don't know.
I'm a little concerned about the idea of voting on something because I felt like it, without being able to justify it in some other way. I feel more comfortable having a video and having you come and present it here, where anyone who wanted to drop by could come, rather than asking anyone who wanted to find out to drive to Brigham City. I know my time is limited, and because I have a lot of children and we school at home. So I really don't have that flexibility really to drive and take a field trip, and I would feel much more comfortable with the information here and being able to say this is the information that was presented and is available to the public, and that's what I'm basing my decision on. That's where I'm coming from.
And I would just so everyone's clear, no matter what you decide to do in investigating this, it still has to follow the very same public process that any other development follows, where the developer has to submit a site plan, they have to submit any requested changes. A use like this would require changes to our zoning ordinance. And so all those would have to go through a very public process where it would be commented on, the site plan would be commented on, the development proposal would be commented on. That would still have to happen regardless of any pre-work that the council decides might be interesting to see if you're willing to consider this or not. And if you're not willing to consider it, I imagine that Mr. Pitt would prefer to know that now.
Yeah,
and so he
we
doesn't
may go to the
spend
next
time.
step and present to you. But again, I hope you feel what I'm feeling. I have spent, 72 years? I'm kind of old. Either working here or living here, minus a few where I've done other things. And I want it to be right for you citizenry that live next to it, that's part of it. And a body of them who are there could go up, could see it, and they could report back. I want clarity. I'm not pulling any hiding things here. We waited until March to share this with you because the city council need to get settled in. We don't have to do this tomorrow, but I want it done right if it's right. And I want it done without contention. I want it done so that the people who have an investment in this have a right to see that and feel that. And so that's who I am. And you got to know that. And so that's why this approach was taken. But I will
We
honor
do know
whatever
that, and we
approach.
do appreciate, I want you to know, we do know, and you can, even with you talking, we can feel that that you love this and you are doing what's right. And so, I don't want you to think that we don't give that a lot of.
But on the other hand, I do feel, I've been here for a couple of years, and I've listened to a lot of that contention and on both sides of the microphone, and I know that there are some strong feelings about the sizes of buildings and the appropriateness of uses, and without some fairly concrete definitions of sizes, I really can't give any sort of I want to hear more.
The facility that we would go to would be a basic look-see of what we're dealing with, what we would like. Now, whether or not we can do it in another way that fits better, we could look and see that. But I would like you to see it, because you draw a picture and put it on the wall, it could look large and very much out of place as you then position that in your mind on a piece of property. But you walk into a facility and see how it's broken up architecturally so it doesn't appear big, and then you walk inside and you see what each little compartment does for this community of older people in the last days of their lives, and there's a different kind of a feel. So I appreciate that, but I also appreciate what that kind of a project would do in terms of us being better, and I have to address them too. They've got to be able to feel that and understand that before they could accept it.
Well, I believe that you can feel something inside the building and it can function well from the inside, but if the outside doesn't function well with the things around it, if it requires you being inside to say, oh, this is a good thing, then that's not something that's good for our community in that spot. I can see that the idea, the concept is a good one, but it may not fit well in that spot if it doesn't harmonize with the neighbors.
I understand that.
So
But we could
that's
talk
where
to
my
the,
concern
have these
is.
people talk to the neighbors. We could bring in the city council of Brigham City, see how it was received in the community and what has happened since. Exploratory things are important, I believe, because they do away with a lot of misunderstandings, and that's all I would like to hear. So I appreciate very much what you're saying. And we will take the approach that you ask us to do.
Yeah.
But my approach is to try and help.
And I appreciate that you've come out and you've let the cat out of the bag in a public forum so that the rumor mill doesn't do what it does. And I think what, kind of to echo what Stephanie's saying, is the problem typically with city government, from my perspective on the other side of the mic, is that staff is always ahead of the council, council is always ahead of the public, and then the public complains to both because they don't know what's going on. So in this process, I think part of that allaying of fears and getting rid of the misunderstandings is letting everyone be on the same factual basis as you build up your proposal. Like Stephanie was saying, and like you were saying, well, on paper it may look really big. Well, if you said, and I'm throwing out a crazy number just for illustration purposes, if you said it was 100,000 square feet, 600 bed facility, you'll get a different reaction than if you said it's a 10,000 square foot facility with 20 beds. And so I think some of that, in engaging what the public response is settling on a number that fits the site plan you have in mind, and then see what the public reaction is to that. Because we can all have in our minds a number that works that may have nothing to do with what the public wants or feels is right for the community.
Yeah, I understand that. And what I'm saying is that basic project would be similar to what we would be proposing. We haven't gone to exact amounts, and we don't know what we would limit it to so that we could get it through. That will come as we evaluate and discern it. And so we'll be glad to do whatever you ask us to do. My invitation, though, is to make sure that there's clarity, that there's transparency in all that we do, and that we don't get factions talking things up and back, and then we come in here and argue with each other. But we try and resolve a lot of things before we come and present something, because if there's an issue of street parking and we can do it underground, if structurally that's possible, then we resolved an issue and we put it up. That saves a lot of contention here. And so those are the issues that I would like to resolve prior to. But we will handle it whatever you would want us to do. But my invitation is to you who will be there and to you to come, and we will set up times or to send zoning, planning, or a committee, or whatever you'd like us to do.
Yeah, if there's any way to put a skeleton around it, I mean, because just, again, I like to watch, it's great we have a big audience tonight to look at the faces. Is when you say underground parking, I look at some faces and I see the light go on that says, that's big. That has nothing to do with reality, but that's the sense I'm getting. So if we can put a skeleton around what it looks like, even basic numbers, then that at least says this is the starting point. Doesn't necessarily mean that's the ending point, but at least it's a talking point where everyone can say this is what we're looking at.
If that's what you'd like us to do at this point, we'd be glad to do that, as long as the citizenry knows what we're doing.
I would be more comfortable with that, to be perfectly honest, and something that's presented here at the council,
Okay.
just so we at least have that.
So I think part of the process is that the city council and the public, if this were to go forward to a proposal stage, needs to understand the difference between what our ordinances require or restrict today and what would be proposed, because there are significant differences. And then you'd have to decide, okay, does that mean you change the proposal or do you change the ordinance? And we can't, in order to do that, there's a fair amount of methodical study that needs to happen. It's not unusual. We did this, we went through this with the Larry H. Miller Theater. We had to make significant changes, and basically the council had to kind of get on board that, yes, I'm willing to study this and discuss the changes. And then once there was a decision that, yes, I'm willing to study it, then we worked on the changes and people could vote yes or no, and it was a split vote on that one as well. If I, for one, would like to go visit this facility, I think it would help me to become more educated on it. You each can decide if you would like to do that. If you do want to investigate this or are willing to consider it, I'd recommend a joint work session with the Planning Commission, because they have to go through the same information to understand what's allowed, not allowed, but staff may have a different opinion on this. They usually do,
a drastically
than me.
different opinion. I know, I appreciate what you're doing and what you're trying to respond to. The reason I'm here is just because I want you to be successful and a landowner to have the right approach to determine the success. Typically, when you see a situation that potentially can be controversial like this, through my experience, the person making the proposal is often in the place of the burden, not the council in that place to handle that burden. Typically, they will do a high-level investigation. They'll do the graphics, they'll do the video recording, they'll do whatever they want with their architects and their team on a high level. Often, before they even approach the city, they have already had neighborhood meetings and talked with the neighborhood and received the feedback of their concerns. They're not worried about convincing the neighborhood, typically from my standpoint at that point in time. They're just simply having their own neighborhood meetings as a civic group of people and trying to figure out and gauge the temperature of that group and where they sit. Then they go back to their team and they discuss, is this something that we can put together that might be able to address it? And also assess, where do we think we can push the button, where we don't push the button. They've already, in their mind, have looked at the
And by
city.
pushing the button, you mean asking the city council to make a change to?
Just a change of an ordinance, which one you want to do to it. So they decide in that risk management if they want to do. You know, the difficult part is that's a lot of upfront expenditure and risk on their part, but that's how they would typically manage the process. They would already identify in the ordinance and have already probably talked to the planner saying what ordinances govern to this, what it is, and they'll do their strategic issue on that. And then if they feel like they need to, rather than start at the bottom with an application, they will come to a council and they will make a presentation. And they're not there to, from my experience, to tell you what your final decision or to seek that you're going to give them a nod. That puts you at risk because you're not sure what your citizens planners and you're not sure what the public process has said about it. You might like it. It might be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's not a time to corner you into deciding that this is the direction to go. But at that point, all of the information's now on the table. They present it to the council. You know the points that conflict with your own ordinances, so you can go back and contemplate what your thing, complicate too, in some fashions.
Absolutely.
But you can go back and think about those issues. That presentation can be done in a work session with the Planning Commission. But what I fear is we don't really want to get into a dialogue up front, decisions about zoning ordinances and going above the process by having a work session and saying, yeah, I like this, we ought to go for this. I think they do the work. It's going to be some expenditure up front on their proposals. They need to look at it. When I hear underground parking, you can already tell what the red flags are going on me, and it has nothing to do with size. So they need to investigate that, put some effort into that, because planners don't feel, remember? We don't feel a thing.
Right. You have no emotions.
No emotions. We're just mean from the get-go.
That's what that planner school does to you. I warned you.
And then they come and they make a presentation on where they think the shortcomings of the ordinances are or where they need to changes in the ordinances. You don't make any decisions yet. You're just receiving so that you have a full breadth of understanding so that once they come back underneath and decide, you know what, we're taking this risk. We're going to go for it. We're going to ask for rezone changes. We're going to ask for text changes. But it's all up front. Everybody knows what is going on and the direction they're heading. And then you allow the process to mold that with the public input. My only red flag of getting up here is I don't want you getting cornered into casting an idea that you may feel you're committing to or not committing to and bypassing that public process. So I think some upfront money is needed. I think the video, I think the study, I think architects need to be engaged in it, and they need to host these neighborhood meetings. You're right, it's controversy. Good people who want to make a presentation take into account long before they propose anything to the city. because then they know where the temperature is. And then they can decide if that temperature is something they can manage. And I think that's the suggestion I have.
Thank you. We appreciate your professional advice.
Let's do that. No, I think what you did is you articulated some of what the concerns would be about where it sits in the public process. I think trying to counterbalance that is you're trying to look for kind of a go, no-go to even spend that initial risk investment in architecture. Is that?
No, when I feel something's good, I'll go to all ends.
Okay.
But what I'm trying to do is, as you meet with a neighborhood, they begin to create a little dark secret thing in this neighborhood, and you meet here, and they do the same thing. And so, Corey, the approach is great, except some people get trumped over in the midst of it, and they make accusations once to another. And that's why I wanted to just make sure we're clear that we will do what you ask us to do, but we're presenting it to you that we think this is good. And we'll visit with each of you, we'll prepare the site plan, we'll do all of those things. We're just saying we think the investigation into a facility like we will be proposing would do more than everything you see there. And that's why I'm here, to do those two things.
I think you've alleviated a lot of what you're worried about because you have came and you have put it out publicly before it's gotten, people feel like, I know people have said to me, oh, well, the city council had already made their mind up 6 months before we knew about it. I think you bringing it out, putting it to the public at the same time you put it to us, I think you've alleviated some of those little groups. I think you being open and being fair and being willing to talk to somebody. So I think to suggest to these people, if you have a question, you're open to ask or talk to them. I assume that you're okay with somebody calling and discussing this with you.
Bruce Pitt, 801-971-0075. And I'm retired except for 3 days a week.
And I think that's good. I think that's going to help some of the, like you said, I think you're not going to get the little groups and you're not going to get the he said, she said, because they can come and ask. And I think that's very important. I think what you've done is really opened it up and been transparent, and that's what we're trying to do as a new city council, is be very transparent. So I appreciate that you are transparent and that the people can. I do think now we do, you need to kind of give us an idea of what you're looking at so that the people have some kind of an idea. And then, they can go there and look and have some type of a.
So, so if someone were to want to go up and look at it, who would they talk to?
Contact me, we'll make arrangements, and we'll meet you there, travel with you up there, have a chance for you to have a bite to eat with these people and to see how that facility runs and is operated, because it speaks volumes for what could happen here. And it's a great opportunity to employ good people. It's a great opportunity. I know that many of you have placed mothers and fathers in homes, and to think that there would be one right here in Centerville, particularly those who love to live and die in Centerville, of which I'm one. By the way, let's get a new cemetery, because there's no more lots for me. So.
There's not, and they're very, very expensive.
Yeah, I know, that's the problem.
So have you done anything to determine whether or not underground parking
We have not.
is feasible?
No, I did not want to precede this meeting with anything, not because we wouldn't be willing to do it, but because I don't want you to think that I'm going to go out preconceived and do all the things. I wanted to gather the information I could, and so I visited with a number who are in the audience, found out the concern on size on some, and if that would be automatically duplicated, we'd have to change. So we've talked through some things. We can come back now and present a much better than we could if we came in and told you what we wanted, and then you tell us what we shouldn't want, and we move ahead. So this is just, the approach is to ask you to think about it, contemplate it, and investigate it.
Bruce, you probably already know that your topic is a hot button, a recent sore spot for some of these neighbors.
I know.
Because there was a zoning change made on the assumption of an assisted living center, and the city got, the neighborhood feels like we got burned badly.
When was that?
That would be with the Hafoka property down on
Through Brighton House.
This is on Porter Lane, west of 400 West, 600 West on Porter Lane. There was a proposal.
So even though the idea of an assisted living center may be good, that may not alleviate all of the fears, because that's how it was approached previously.
Okay.
And it didn't turn out that way.
And I was not aware of that, so I apologize.
No, it's no apology needed, just so that you know that there is extra concern because of having recently been burned that way.
Okay.
I would ask the city council, do you have any concerns with our staff working closely or visiting this location? They may or may not want to do that, but I think they can make better decisions about changes that could either be made in a facility to meet our ordinances or ordinances that have to be changed if they did a little bit more research.
Mayor, I'm happy to visit, just don't feed me. That's my rule. I like to be grumpy and ornery, so don't feed me.
Corey, there is Maddox up there, if that would be appealing to you.
But I think staff can take that. I just want to make sure that if staff is assigned to take a look at it, we're not there to represent whether the council would accept it or not. The joke is the feeling, and I want to appreciate what you mean, because I do believe site visits can be productive. Staff does them frequently. So site visits, but I think it still comes down to that we have to take the objective review of it. What's the size? What's the facility? What's the intensity? And those often everybody gets caught up into. Then we have to balance it, and what gets left out is the design, the layout, because the devil's in the details. I'm a planner, so the devil's in the details, and so there are mitigating factors to massing in architecture. There's parking issues. There's a lot of mitigating factors. So, I think the obligation of somebody who's preparing a project like that is going to go through the physical part of it and the size of the facilities and the range of the size of facilities that they're thinking about. And obviously, their strategic is they want to maximize the opportunity. That's what everybody would normally do, but know that they may come down to it. Then they also spend some time looking at the design and investing, time with an architect to put the devil in the details and the options to look at it. And I see that done often with the public way in advance. And then if it's a group think tank, they're just here to give you, this is where your ordinances wouldn't allow it, this is what we're thinking of it. And my fear is I just don't want you locked in this position to where you're casting anything and bypassing that traditional process.
Our intent was not to bypass anything. Right.
Oh, I understand that.
Just
But I just don't want the decision-making getting to a point where it's like, can I go? Can I do this? Will I get this? I mean, all respect to what you're trying to do. You're trying to give some sense. But anyhow, I'm just happy to go. Just don't feed me. That's my only rule.
I'm completely in support of sending a hungry, dispassionate staff member up to take a look at it.
Works for me.
Any further questions for Mr. Pitt? Okay. Thank you very much for coming and educating and the respectful manner in which you proposed that. Thank you.
Please, anyone who is there, please visit with me. Let's talk, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, from two exciting agenda items to a third, we have a request to study active green space. Ms. Britta Johnson has requested that this be brought to the attention of the council. Sent an email about concerns regarding the development of the Hofoka property and a request to consider in the future how we handle future applications. I'd like to give her a couple of minutes to explain that, and then we have a staff report on the same issue, on the issue based on the issues that you raised in the email.
Great.
So you can either speak now before Corey or afterwards, whichever you prefer. He probably would like a break.
Well, I kind of would like to see what you found out. So actually, you know why I'm doing this? Because of a question you asked while the development was going on, and my ear went ding, ding, ding. He knows we got a problem with our ordinance, and there's nothing we can do to prevent at this point because we are lacking some tools in our community to ensure responsible development. So I could say a minute here and then get some some feedback. But thank you so much for getting this on the agenda. I really appreciate it. I am here as a concerned citizen, and let me tell you about my background. I'm a contract paralegal. I am trained to look for risk, to mitigate risk, to watch for things. And my ear went ding, ding, ding when I heard Corey ask a question about the differentiation on our green space requirement. My concerns that I saw is that we don't have a differentiation. So if you have even a residential home going up, and there's pretty much no yard, it's a drainage ditch in the back, that's their green space. It's not usable, it's not beautiful, it's not in the interest of our community. And so I think we need to set aside some differences on them. And I thought about this for a while, and I also want to suggest potentially doing zones for this. So we might have different requirements for west of I-15 and then above, and forgive me for saying Orchard Drive, but I don't know the street number because, let's be honest, I'm from the Bay Area in California and I've been in Utah for a lot of years, but I can't always follow the whole directional addresses still. But to separate it, because I understand that we do have some hillsides that is not usable space. And what I don't want to do is prevent someone who wants to have a nice yard, be the hill and beautify that, not be able to build the home. So I think we need some differentiation so that we don't open ourselves to some things later. Also, I wanted to examine what our sister cities are doing. We have a wonderful League of Cities that meets. Do they still meet, Mayor?
We meet regularly.
Okay. We have wonderful cooperation in Davis County, fantastic, and I want to say Ann County and North Salt Lake, because I think they're on that League of Cities.
The League of Cities and Towns is a statewide organization.
Is
We have a council of governments that is all the cities and the county and the organizations in Davis County, the school board.
We have some great camaraderie then, and we can see what our sister cities have done and what they've encountered, what language they've used, if they've had challenges to that language, so we don't have ambiguity that could be challenged. Because we want to make sure that we don't run into legal costs of people challenging the zoning code because it's not clear in its nature. So those are the things I've just thought about. So I'll leave it at that and maybe let Corey.
Thank you very much.
I might have another one or comment after I hear, if that's all right.
A rebuttal?
Corey doesn't like anyone speaking after.
Oh, yes, I do. I like the focus turning somewhere else as fast as it can go.
He's going to be a while. You may want to sit down.
You're welcome to chime in.
I sit all day doing contracts. I want to stand up.
Yeah, you're welcome to chime in anytime, ask a question. First of all, I think what I have to prepare will address active versus passive. But I think that's not what I was actually addressing directly in the ordinance and the presentation of the Hofoka property. As I recall, what I was trying to address is the issue is how does the drainage channel get calculated into the density issue, which is a different issue than active versus passive. And so to answer that little tidbit, when you're talking about just development and grabbing raw ground, I've seen jurisdictions that go in and say, all right, you want to develop this piece of ground, how much of it is on hillside, above 30% slopes, how much of it is in wetlands, how much of it is constricted property, and they subtract out constrained lands in your calculation of what's usable. So that once you get to a net of the raw property that's usable, then the ordinances kick in. Most cities locally don't get that complicated. You'll see that mostly in the Wasatch back areas. Your communities up there spend a lot of time worrying about skyline, the steep hillsides that people have a lot of money to build on, and so they get very, very disciplined on calculating the developable acreage, which is very different than how we generally, cities across the Wasatch Front, calculate things. And so I just think that that's a different issue on how you want to apply calculations. You know, a gross versus a net. Is it a gross of the raw land? Is it a net of the usable land, but it's really a gross versus the subtraction of streets? And that gets very complicated. And I think that is a shortcoming if that is a value. If you feel that development, you have sensitive lands in your city that are of sufficient size and acreage that when somebody starts applying their density calculations to, you want that subtracted out. The places that I can think that that even comes close for Centerville is up on the hillside. I think the Hofoka with the wetlands area was an anomaly down here. We don't have large areas to develop that would subtract that out. If we look at the hillside, and if we look at annexation, which I know is not a good word about the hillside, but if we were to look at that, you're now in a place where I think the issue of calculating 30% plus slopes into usable acreage is problematic. And so we do fall short in that area, but I don't think it's a widespread issue in Centerville. But if there's a couple of places you want to do that on, we can make those edits to it to subtract out sensitive lands.
If you go back, and I was right in the middle of Hofoka because I was on the planning commission and we've had conversations. If you look at that, I think that most of the issues would have disappeared if that wetland space had been a line down between the rows of houses. In other words, part of the issue was that property was too far away for the people on the south end to really have access to it. If it was close to them, they'd have had access to it and it was good access. And so I kind of disagree a little bit with what you're saying. I think proximity in this thing is a
Well, I don't think
major
you're disagreeing.
issue.
I think you're just saying now that we get outside the sensitive lands, where do the calculations go? I mean, I think it's relative. To people who are experiencing new development, they want that space to be utilized and push and open up some things. If you're a resident 5 years later inside of that development, you will love that buffer between you and the commercial. And it'll maintain your property value because you've got such a significant distance between you and an intense commercial. Where if you push that development back into it and try to use what we're now talking about, passive and active space, which is a different subject, I think residents living in it would regret being that close. That big buffer maintains their values much better. But if you're a new person or if you're an existing person watching new development you want that to be used up because you want that to spread out and them to get further away from each other. So it's a perspective in my mind at that place, and you put your values where your perspective is. But when you're talking about going down through the center, you preferred it, that's not a sensitive lands issue. That's now becoming an issue of active versus passive. And so I'll just run through this quickly because I know you've been having some fun subjects tonight. But I think if I
Corey,
run...
we got the slideshow
Got it
stuff.
up there. First one, understanding density. I'll go through this, and then if you have questions, so you can understand how it relates.
By the way, this has been added to Novus just before the meeting tonight, so it's available on.
And I'm not here to fix anything, it's just to give you a perspective, and then you can go from there.
Where did this document come from?
I created it.
Okay, thank you.
With the butterflies and everything?
Yeah.
Wow, Corey.
Well, it was green.
You must have ate that right before it or something, not been healthy.
Yeah, St. Patrick's coming up. I was getting excited for it. So just and this is now on the Novus, people can use it, you can look at it and ask your questions. Just want you to know how our ordinances work because this is very relevant to the active versus passive issue. Pre-2003, you had a very traditional zoning ordinance. That traditional zoning ordinance picked a lot size and said, we want houses on 8,000 square foot lots. We want them on 10,000 square foot lots. We want them on 12,000 square foot lots. And how you listed that is you'd put R, mean residential, 1 means single family, 1 dwelling unit per lot, and then dash, whatever your lot size was. So R18, single family, it's 8,000 square foot lot. If you had R210, which
And
you
was
didn't have...
was that 8,000 square foot lot or 8,000 square foot minimum?
8,000 square foot minimum. Good question. So it had at least be 8,000 square feet. R110, 10,000 square feet. You don't have this, but R2, 10,000, would now say we've moved into a 2-family or 2 dwelling allowance, and that you can have 2 units per 10,000 square feet. And then so on and so forth, R3, 15, so forth and so on. You didn't have any of those, but that's how traditional zoning works. And it's a net, so, or it's a net, so your lot has to be 8,000 square feet minimum, or 10,000 square feet minimum. And generally what the cities across were finding is they got tired of the very cookie cutter subdivisions. They were monotonous, same size, and some people liked it, but it was something that was generally attacked for 2 reasons. Cookie cutter, which did not make interesting neighborhoods, and 2, it made monotone neighborhoods. Generally, the housing was exactly the same price. And it was just a matter of whether you were on the end of a cul-de-sac, which my wife happens to like a lot. If you're on a cul-de-sac, they just liked it more because they're less likely they think their kids are going to get hit by cars playing street football. And so cul-de-sacs become the prime lots, and the other lots on other collector streets become the less prime lots. But basically, the developer can't get anything more. He's got this cost per linear frontage, you have the minimum feet, you have the minimum size, and I've got to somehow amalgamate just enough to rebalance this. And all the housing is generally within the same consistent range. In 2003, you changed that. Part of that change was your moderate income housing element created in 2002 to look at your regulatory to encourage various types of housing. And you also had a consultant come on board, and they started looking at the city as a whole, and you went to a very different program. You went to a gross density. And this is back to the issue of, do wetlands count in that gross density or not? They don't right now. They do, they're part of it. They're not subtracted out. So the gross density was per acre, it's the entire. We don't want any more than 4 units an acre. And so when you look at that, you have RL, which is 4 units an acre, RM, 4, 8 conditional, the controversy, and high, the 8 to 12, the controversy. And so now you're just a gross acreage, and you just get that many units per acre, whether it's permitted or conditional. The idea of that is that you can now take a piece of property, and where you have premium area, you can get a larger lot and a larger house price. And when you're facing your project on a collector road, that premium's not there. It's not at the end of the cul-de-sac where you get it. Now they can make a slightly smaller lot, be cost effective, and make up the difference in the larger lot, as long as it balances out to no more than 4 units an acre. So under our ordinances, to meet the minimums is only a 5,800 square foot lot. That's as big as it has to be. But you're going to have some lots or something out there going to counter that to make up that difference. And so you'll have an estate lot somewhere else. And that's to create the variety, to allow the change in the location of the lot, the size of the lot, and so that the premiums can make up for the constrained areas. But as we said, as long as it's no more than the maximum amount per acre. And so that's why you did that in 2003. How well thought out that was in 2003, we're learning over time that it's not so much fun. People realize some of the consequences that come from it. Second slide here is your parks open space. This is very important when you start to talk about active versus passive, and where your ordinances would create some consternation with individuals. You have a parks master plan that calls for just over 300 acres. That's your goal. It doesn't say whether it's all active or it's all passive. Your just goal is to hit a little over 300 acres, and you want to have 15.26 acres per thousand at a cap. Your estimated build out is 20,000 for the city. So that's your master plan goal, is you'll get there. And you're just about there in all reality of the amount of passive space you have in the city. You have right now developed of 119 acres. Your passive open space is 178 that's located. I can't tell you where it all is, but I know you have a huge quarter section up on the hillside. And your pending improvement 8.5 right now, and yet to be acquired 7.2. If that all comes in, you'll just be 312 acres or something like that, the calculation comes out to be. That's what you're trying to fund, that's what you're trying to build, and that's your decision about open space by ordinance. That's the only place you've made a direct decision about park space, passive and active. So if you go to now the density, or understanding impact fees, when development comes in, you've adopted an ordinance that says new development needs to pay its share towards this park space. And you've done the calculation and done the study that justifies it under state law. It says we're going to charge every dwelling $2,057. That's your current. It used to be a little bit lower, not too long ago, but it's been raised, and it's now $2,057 per acre. Now,
Per acre or per dwelling unit?
I mean per dwelling, excuse me, per dwelling. So when you're looking at a density of 4 units per acre, your single-family development is generating just over $8,000 towards your parks. You're charging the developer and ultimately the lot owner that buys it. That's where the cost gets passed to. You're charging for that 4 acres a little over $8,000. If you went to the medium zone at 8 units, you're getting $16,000. And at the density of 12 units, you're getting $24,000 per acre. We don't have a lot of residential medium land zoned that's undeveloped. And we don't have, I don't think, any RH, or if there is, it's a small sliver of RH. You're funding your parks now primarily through what we've done with the PDOs and any new residential development. Your single-family development is really flat. You know, we got Woods Park going, but we don't have much else going in the city. There's a few ideas in the future you'll hear. Wonder how that all play out, but you're not gaining ground with your single-family development towards maintaining your parks. That's not meant as a negative. That's just where your status sits.
So Corey, if I may, there's 2 properties getting developed right now on Chase Lane, both of which were rezoned from A1 to R1. Do they pay that?
No, the one on 85 East Chase Lane was existing home, so it is grandfathered for the fee.
There's two of them. They both previously had homes, so they're both grandfathered then.
So they won't be paying your park impact fee.
But so the new one's up by me, though, on 7th East.
The Brighton Home subdivision up there would pay a park impact fee. New subdivisions will pay the park impact fee.
And that's $2,057 per every house they build.
Right. So just give you examples, and they're not all that they paid this. I just took the 2,057 and applied it. So if you took your new number, some of them paid a little less, but Hidden Acres, that's the area that should have been the cemetery expansion during the controversy. They didn't pay this. It's a little bit less. They paid $32,009 for their homes.
What he means by less is that at that time, the park impact fee was $1,200 per unit.
Yeah. I'm just trying to give you the current number of what it would generate. Hidden Acres would have, under the current fee, $32,000. Woods Park, 27 units, $55,000. Florentine Towns, which is just west of or south of the Walmart, they didn't quite pay this much, but that would have been $123,000 towards your parks. The Porter Walton Townhomes, Hofoka, they will pay this fee, I believe. For their 47 units, they'll pay over $96,000 towards your park. The RHPDO, the Pioneer Estates, they paid the $1,200 fee. This was a large project back in 2005. They had 227 units, not 225, but if they generated the fee at the current, it would have been $462,825 paid towards your parks.
And what was theirs, do you remember?
It would have been $1,200 an acre.
Right.
So
About half that.
about 60%.
Right.
Your Legacy Crossing, this is the 206 units over at the theater. They paid, I believe, the $1,200. The current fee would have been, if you used it, would have been $423,000. The Legacy Trails, I believe this is the Fred Hale project. I believe they're under the current impact fee.
They are.
They will pay $333,000 towards your impact and building of your parks. I'm not trying to say you need to do high-density development. I don't want you to take away from this that that's your decision. You decide how you pay for the parks. I'm just saying that when new development comes in, the multifamily is generating a greater revenue per acre. You still have the people. It's not apples and oranges. It's a little bit apples and oranges, but you do have a little less population in the multifamily than you do in single family on a typical basis.
Per unit.
Per unit. But you can see that per acre they're paying a significant, and so why is that important? That's important because from my standpoint, if you want to talk about, separate out the sensitive lands, if you want to talk about that you want multifamily development to provide active open space and not passive open space, the question that they will arrive to you is what am I getting off on my impact fee for doing my own space for my own dwelling units? And that's a value consideration you have to make. Will you give a reduction if you're going to now change your ordinances to do active space requirements?
Except we could make a change within the other ordinance to go do the comparisons of gross versus net space.
If you're including your sensitive lands. Right now, we just do per unit. It's not on the land area, the calculation's per dwelling unit.
Right. If we excluded sensitive lands, then...
Yeah, you would drop the overall density, but I don't think you're going to have a lot of places in Centerville that's going to drop it due to sensitive lands. So I just bring that up, not trying to promote it that you have to do multifamily, because you know where your park status is, you know where you want to pull the money and pay for it, and you can just decide that this is how we're going to hit our goal. And you can do it any way you want. I'm not promoting it. But the passive open space exists in all of our zones, but it's uniform for the most part. The passive open space is how much yard space you have to have after you build your buildings and everything else. So your RL zone, your single family, it's a 60-40. You can cover 60% of your lot in buildings and driveways and so forth like that. You have to leave 40% of your lot in some type of green space. That's connected to your drainage, and that's connected to your yards and your setbacks, because you have to have some setbacks for yards. So that's how your overall lot, when you build your house, you get to cover 60% of your lot with stuff. However, in your front yard and side yards, which are considered semi-public space and adjoint to your neighbors, the hard surfacing of your setbacks cannot exceed 50%. So this is the idea: you can't fill your whole driveway with a tennis court, or your whole front yard with a driveway plus expansion for a tennis court. You have to leave some green space in your up to 50%, calculating your side yards. That's consistent with the RM zone. That's consistent with the RH zone. There's where your passive space is. It sits there. And that's what FOCA property developed. They developed based on their passive space, but they gave the active space as part of their selling the approval. There was no requirement for the active space. We can look at access to active space to parks, but they're not required under our ordinances to provide the facilities. And as the Planning Commission tried to expand that, I was the grumpy planner saying, you cannot require active space. If they offer it, that's fine, as part of their overall passive space development, but you can't require the active space. But they did provide some, and some of your developments have. You got a tot lot in Florentine, you've got a pool and tot lot over at the Pioneer. But you also have failures when that's done. Greenfield Acres is a good place where that space was failed.
How did it fail?
The tennis courts and stuff have all been demised.
Demolished?
So, yeah, they don't use the tennis courts there anymore. You have pocket parks in some of your multifamily development as their desire to provide amenities to their residents. So they're providing that above and beyond their payment of a park space. And so and in your pocket parks, your controversial places, they typically are not long lasting. Once the equipment breaks down, the homeowners association typically chooses just to leave it back into passive space. When you have an excess passive space, you see sometimes your multifamily will capitalize on that. Your Chase Lane Village had some extra passive space, and so they built another couple of buildings in the project, the homeowners association did, and sold them for some revenue. And so you see that long-term viability of active space inside of projects, in my mind, is questionable whether it's sustainable in itself. Example of other cities. I heard this. Everyone that we called here in the South Davis area, active space is a bonus. They provide it. They provide it as a density bonus. And so you have Farmington. I'll just read them to you so you can have it in minutes. Farmington, the ordinance requires a percentage of passive open space. If an active open space is created, they're able to get more density, or the required amount of open space for the project can be renegotiated. So if it's 40% and they do some active, you can drop it to 30 if you want, but it's all part of a bonus program. West Bountiful, they may authorize through a development agreement specific incentives based on what has been provided to the community, such as active space. Incentives for the developer may include alterations to the setbacks or requirements to open space. So again, it's a bonus issue, and the other stuff is negotiated. Bountiful, no active space is required and is only addressed on a case-by-case basis to protect, or by the project requires a change of zoning to create a PUD, so that's when you do it. If active space is provided, then incentives may be given. So again, it's part of a bonus program. It's not a mandatory minimum requirement. North Salt Lake, in order to negotiate a bonus density, the developer must show how active space is being used. The amenities must fit the demographics of those who live in the community, such as outdoor fitness areas, community garden, dog park, etc., not just a tot lot. That's where the failures of these small amenities occur over time. But it's part of a bonus program.
So did North Salt Lake, was the golf course part of their negotiated?
I don't know that specifically on that project.
Okay.
Wish I did, but I don't golf there, so I don't
You mean
golf.
the public golf course in North Salt Lake?
Pardon?
That's a public golf course, but owned by the city.
Yeah, but so I was saying, was that part of the negotiated active
I don't know.
space?
Yeah, I don't know that. I am a baseball player, not a golfer, and it shows when I try to play golf. Woods Cross, additional density or flexibility in the ordinance requirements are based on amenities provided by the developer. This process is reviewed by the City Council and the approval of the development agreement. No specific types of active space is required or specified and is at the discretion of the developer. So for active passive, you'll find that most communities don't find that the active is their priority in their ordinances. It's certainly part of it. You look at, you've got multifamily, they don't have the private backyard, so you're looking to say, hey, how can these people get some space and throw a frisbee and take their dog for a walk? So it just becomes a natural part of the multifamily discussion, but it's why you don't have active. But go back to the original thing I said in the meeting, which I think spurred it. The density right now is just calculated on the gross acreage of the parcel under ownership. If you want to subtract out sensitive lands, that's something we can look at. Just on the real periphery, we can go back and show you. I think Hofoka is an anomaly. Most of your sensitive lands are either going to be out in the Shorelands Park, we're not dealing with multifamily densities, or it's up on the hillside if you want slopes to be constrained and not calculated.
We're not dealing with them for now. What's 5 years from now going to look like? I'm from Milpitas, California. Do you know where that is?
Very well.
San Jose and Fremont. Let's say MC Hammer's mansion. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Nobody could develop on the hillside. It was beautiful. We had golf courses. The city made a very, very clear line in the sand at the beginning. We're not going to allow development. Well, space runs out. Space runs out. You need space for your population. Things change. I'm sorry, but as much as we're going to fight it, the hillside is going to be developed a little more. It is. 10 years from now, 15 years from now. But if we can lay a groundwork, and I think Corey's got the right idea to do the gross versus net calculation and have those things be in there for the future. And thank you for the education. I truly did not understand, I guess, the concept of active versus passive space. And then the next comment would be, do our ordinances allow those negotiations to give on our passive space if they're going to put in active space?
The negotiations are a mandatory passive amount, so it's 40%. If they want to offer more space, which FOCA did, they're above the 40% requirement. But it could also be just part of the 40% and not additional. So
But we don't, our ordinance doesn't allow a negotiation of that other space, like the setback from the road or anything like that, if they give.
There's only one tool, it's a plan development overlay where almost all of the ordinance gets negotiated, but that is a legislative process and generally used to get density bonus. Generally. Not in all cases, but has.
So I think this has been very educational for us to consider this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could you review active and passive one more time?
Say that again?
Redefine the definition of active versus passive.
Active is where you're simply putting in stuff where they're actively recreating and participating in something. So tot lots, tennis courts, things like that. Passive is just natural open ground that you have to leave open with grass, shrubs, trees, and so forth.
So if it's a mowed grass field, it's considered passive.
Right.
But if it's a field.
But you could argue that if you put in those.
If it's a field with a track around it, then it's considered active.
Yeah.
So.
Even if it's undevelopable?
Well, the example
In the
is the
passive
HFOCA used most of their passive calculation was in that restricted, it's not wetlands, it was a restricted easement where they couldn't put buildings. And so that by default became their passive space because they can't use it for active.
So the big park down on between Fourth West and the frontage road, active, passive?
Community park.
The big park, it's mainly active. You got ball fields,
When you
soccer
say,
fields.
well, I understand. But you just changed my question. Active, passive, or is it split?
So maybe a way to look at it would be, think of Freedom Hills Park. You've got some playing fields and equipment, grassy area, and then you've got a lot of kind of natural areas, especially on the hillside.
And the trail going up, that would be
trails in between
passive.
it. You'd consider that passive, but the areas where you could play sports
Yeah.
and walk around, you consider that active.
Correct.
Okay,
So I
so the low flat spot's all active and everything going further up is okay.
Yeah, I think that's where some of your 170
Yeah.
acres come into play.
Freedom Hills Park is 9 acres of developed park and 18 acres of hillside.
So you got 18 in passive.
And then you've got 160 on the hillside here. That's where the 178 comes from of open space that the city owns.
So I think the policy issue for the city council to consider is, do you want to direct the planning commission to study the issue of should we subtract sensitive lands from the ordinance or not? Or should that be eliminated from calculations?
And what Corey's just told us is there isn't enough of it to really worry about.
In his opinion.
In his opinion.
I think there's a lot, but I'm not going to like swear on a grave. I've done that before.
Well, I thought you already did that.
Other than the hillside.
The hillside.
Yeah, that's
which
what I
is,
was going to say, the hillsides.
And other than the shorelands area, which is in your your general plan to become a business park. It won't have a presumably residential component.
So is there any action you want to take on this, or I think it's been good to be educated on the issue?
I think we ought to ask the planning commission to look at it and give us a referral of whether or not it should be upgraded, especially with regard to the hillside, but the whole thing.
And Corey, can I ask you, we typically have a goal-setting session with the planning commission. This took a lot longer than, we don't have time to discuss this in that session, but is this something that you'd recommend we discuss jointly, or just if the council's interested, send it and have the same discussion?
It depends on the urgency that you're seeing of it. I think it can be part of your goal session because that's coming up shortly, but if this is something that's critical and you see an urgency to it, then you would give a directive now and we just
Put it on the list.
You know, I'm always open for job security, so, you know.
Well, I think since active development still continues, it probably has some urgency, so I would motion that we send it to the planning commission to have a consideration of active versus passive and sensitive land calculations, to recommendations from the planning commission.
I agree and second that.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That looks like it passes unanimously. More work for you. Thank you. I would like to take a 5-minute break.
Gee, and I thought I was the one that always asked for that.
You can't pause that video.
No, it's not right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I put it on the list. I think everything else is not there yet, but we can look at that. But, you know, I looked up, it does have like. I love them.
So this is coming right now.
So this is a song. YouTube seems to be
That's a little bit.
That's what it's interesting.
So we probably need to make it a little bit wider. No. No, because you're actually back.
And it might be a home on.
We need to make it wider.
It needs to be slightly wider.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting, because I assumed you could, but yeah. So it's got to go back over.
It's the building. It's like.
No, you can go to different stuff. I mean, I got the second where you want to just have the council. Obviously, you want to
Well, like I said, it's not clear cut, but it's the business we can certainly have.
So, yeah, I need to.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah, that's good, you know, I just thought about catching it. It doesn't really catch the podiums. I was trying to make it as tight as I could.
He is doing stuff. He is doing stuff.
Run the camera, so my
Oh, that was a good question too, because I didn't really, realize that. So it sounds like the only beneficiary we have is rattlesnake. This was not even, basically DWR being let have it.
It sounds like they don't. It sounds like they take them out to the field, which would make sense. But if you can't mitigate the risk, you shouldn't go. I would have said at that point, okay, now that's my problem. Is you can't mitigate the risk.
What about the fire at your place? Yeah, we just save somebody else, but what about the fire at your place? So yeah, that one there was literally.
Kids need somewhere to live. I can make the same.
You just need to find it, except for,
If you've been raising rats and things like that, neighbors would put up a for sale by neighborhood sign.
So it would.
So the tricky thing here is that we have a portion of the zone that persons have to so they don't want it, and they don't want high-level use of commercial because that would disrupt the and so that's why personally I'm very open to exploring the system gets in because I want to know what people will say yes to. Single family homes is completely unreasonable. There's going to be such high costs in mitigating situation. It's a high cost to begin with because it's and that's going to be basic to try to enforce single family housing is to guarantee right, but those next to mainstream properties are very different. So it would be so then the big question is what use should we
it was, but that's what I thought.
I think that you said this is a and I appreciate is the hardest thing about the process is that it would be better if we could get so much more information with the developer who were interested in why would they do that if they were closing the restoration?
And it's not nice because you didn't get such a really great names, people that sucker, and they got nothing.
It's hard to because we can't short the process, but it's unfair sometimes to all of these have been productive.
We're down to the easy part.
It's not.
No, this was unusual in that sense.
I kind of went pretty well.
But let's make it unusual in another sense. Let's end
That's
by-
why I wanted them. I mean, I wanted people here, I want people to know so that will this be discussed from the very beginning? And they don't come in halfway through when we think, we haven't heard from anybody, we think this is gonna be great, and then all of a sudden they're.
Yeah, I think.
Chocolate chip?
You know what I mean? And in reality, the whole process was you know, so it was just impossible.
Well, they've all gone home, you know it's online now.
Go through the process
So where can we stream this?
If you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, you can stream it. So Centerville City's YouTube channel.
Go to YouTube,
Yeah.
and you do it on your computer right now,
Okay.
They did tell me, if you
All right,
had
go to
a thought,
YouTube,
you
hang
would
on.
put it there.
and search Centerville City, one word, no spaces.
Yeah, Centerville was doing Centerville City.
Wow,
One,
I was trying
one
to
longest
see
of Centerville City.
I don't want
if there were,
stuff to come up. I
you
don't
can't
like
see the
that.
presenters on
Check
each side.
everything. If
You
you
go
change
in
these
red
to
though,
text amendments,
you do have a
and then
Gmail
look on
account.
here, and
If you go in YouTube red, then you don't get the.
because they were developers, they knew
What's the
about
bad
it.
stuff?
You didn't tell me.
You don't get all the
That
ads.
was
No,
their
it's just a-
Just
You have to have a
YouTube?
Gmail account.
if they had.
How much longer
Okay, and then I sent to them that. Oh, there we go. Keith.
There's about a 15-second delay though.
Raised all the way up.
So you'll see stuff that happened about 15 seconds. I think it's
So are
something
you,
like
are you
that.
leaning out of the field of view? Is that what you're doing?
Well, maybe if I just do that.
Trying to find out what the zone is? I can't be seen.
All right, let's see if we can get,
Make an arrangement where it was.
Bill, can you hear us? We'd like to get started.
I need to get it wider for the podium.
What? Should we go ahead and get started without Bill? I think we're just talking about garbage, right?
Just garbage.
Bill needs to hear this. Calling for Bill.
Aren't you supposed to do a countdown of bells? 3 bells, 2 bells, 1?
Telling his constituents you're sitting in. Being late. The thousands that are watching out there.
I've got one, thanks.
Are they?
I was telling Lisa was saying you didn't have to do that. Jake, you can sit there and just, there wasn't a delay, you can go. So this is gonna happen. He's
Oh,
15
you're,
seconds.
you're low energy.
It's pretty expensive.
Well, you have to fund that sort of thing.
Sorry.
All right, let's talk about garbage. Blaine, could you
Okay,
give us a report on the solid waste and recycling contract,
okay.
please?
As I discussed a little bit in the background, in the backup, our contract's gonna run out at June 30th with our current carrier, ACE. So we have a decision to make whether we go out for bid, general bid from ACE and maybe other companies, or just renegotiate a contract with ACE. I know last year we looked at going out for bid. We want to make sure we get direction of this council. Going out for bid is not really simple, because we want to make sure we get a good carrier. So in the RFP, we've wanted to do inspection of their equipment, list of equipment. Last time we did it, Randy and I spent quite a bit of time. If we did change carriers, there is an impact not only on staff, but the citizens. You change out recycling cans because they own the recycling cans. The other cans we own, but routes and such would change. So that's some argument sometimes of whether you want to change carriers or not. The other option is just going to discussions with renew the contract with ACE. And I said the two reasons why you may not renew that, looking at renewing that or just going out for bid is quality of service. And ACE has always provided us great quality of service. I don't know if you can get somebody to provide better service, maybe equal, but not better. The other is the cost. And so are we getting a fair cost for the services in our city? It's looking at this and discussing in my own mind. We're certainly glad to go through the process of bidding. And we'd want to get that started right away. But the big difficult part right now is recycling. If you've seen from the letter, it came from Richard Hammock. Recycling has gone completely upside down, where there is no market for recyclables. Honestly, a lot of it since the last couple of months throughout the Wasatch Front's been taking to landfills because there's just no market to take that. So the cost of recycling is really up in the air right now. You know, fuel's come down for the regular pickup, but I know that you talk to some of the carriers and, you know, they know it's not always going to stay down. ACE does use quite a bit of natural gas, so there's a little bit more stable. So we're just looking really for the direction. And my recommendation would be we enter in some negotiations maybe with a group. And the reason why I don't bring a specific proposal from them is not put them at a disadvantage. If we go RFP, I don't want out in the public, okay, what they're willing to bid, what their bid is, then everybody know they can bid against them and bid 10 cents lower or something. That we enter in some discussions, whether that be, you know, just staff or maybe even a council member or the mayor or something, to see if we can come up with something, a reasonable renegotiation of our contract. As I think about this more, I'm just a little bit uncomfortable going out for bid right now just because of the unstableness in the climate, especially with recycling. We could get in a situation where we're paying more than we should, and then we're under contract. Most generally that a new service provider will want at least 5 years because they're going to make an investment in cans, they're going to make an investment in equipment, so they need 5 years to be able to build out and recoup that. If you did it shorter, then your costs are obviously going to be a lot higher because they need to recoup it in 2 years. So we're just looking for your direction, honestly. Do you want to go out for a full RFP, get bids on costs from anybody who's willing to submit? Though there's probably 4 or 5 along the Wasatch Front that could provide service, meet the qualifications. Or should we look at trying to renegotiate our contract with ACE?
And Blaine, I think it's healthy to go out to bid regularly, but is your concern that going out to bid now, we're going to have a real jump in recycling prices, and if you waited a year...
I don't know if it's going to change, but it'd be interesting to see what's going to happen in the recycling market. Right now, I mean, there's a real big concern from the carriers that you can see from ACE that they may have to start paying to have it disposed of. So we're entering into a cycle right now where we may have recycling costs go up considerably when they could come down, and then you're kind of, you know, I guess the only thing anybody's going to be willing to negotiate contract, well, as prices change, we want to renegotiate everything because you enter a contract, they base their contract on that and what they're going to do.
And why would ACE be motivated to give us a better price via negotiation than they would via a bid?
Because they've already got the equipment, they've already got the routes, they already have the cans, they already have everything invested here.
But if they bid, don't they have that same motivation?
Yeah, yeah. So really, just, I mean, it's a lot of it, if you want to go out for bid, we'll get all the documents put together and go out for bid. I just think there's some advantage to thinking, well, do we want to go through all that process, or do we want to look just renegotiate with?
Have we been 6 years since the last time we bid? Is that what I remember?
Well, we renewed the contract a couple of times. It's been 2003 since we went to a full RFP for them.
And have you done any kind of informal comparison of our costs versus other similar cities?
You know, and that's one thing I haven't. That was one reason why I see if you wanted to do that before we made a decision. Green waste is also one that'd be interesting to see where those costs have gone because the tonnage is so high on that. They're paying a lot to dispose and take that up and carry it. Not the disposal up at the plant, but carrying that up to the facility is really expensive because it's so heavy.
Didn't you do that comparison for us last year?
I'm sure I could get it and update it really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the input that I would have is that we discussed this pretty thoroughly last year. We even had a work session with representatives from ACE, and I felt quite comfortable staying with them. And I believe, if my memory is serving me correctly, that you did give us some comparative information as far as what
Yeah,
other
I
cities
didn't
were
pull
paying.
that back, but I know we do have it. It's easily obtained, but just calling around and getting what their carriers charge them, not their, to the public, because there's other costs that are built in that, but what the carriers charge.
I'd really like to know that. I'd like to know what
Before we
other
make a
cities
decision
do.
on what that
I
is.
will make the comment, I do think they do us a wonderful service. I mean, I am out and about all the time, and, I see them stop and get out and pick up the
They
dirty
do.
diapers that they've dropped on the,
I mean,
on the
that's-
ground, and, or,
Yeah.
sometimes
And they
I'm
take
running out there in
pride
my
that it's
nightgown, and he
Customer
waits for
service
me.
first, and so, I mean, that's why I say there's two reasons you make sure you're getting a good, fair cost. And the other is, are you happy with their service? I mean, the service, I said, I don't think you can do better. If somebody
I
did
don't
as
think
good,
it's-
maybe not better. So it's, okay, what do we feel like the cost comparison would be if we go out for bid? Say you could come back and you think you got something a lot better. Just saying that the process is not real simple, and if we're gonna go through all that, if we just feel like a leaning, hey, let's just go out and renegotiate. Even, we could do a shorter term contract with ACE because they're already invested. We could do, a 2-year or something like that because they're not gonna have to reinvest in all the equipment.
In my mind, that's the only real advantage in not going out to bid is if somebody's going to bid, they have to try to guess what the recycling market will be 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Whereas if you negotiate, then it's only a year.
Yeah.
In the past, that's been to our advantage. Right now,
It just.
with China not buying any recycling
Well, and the low,
goods.
China, and then the low oil prices, as he said. Plastics are now cheaper to manufacture new than to recycle. How long is that gonna last? That's what nobody knows right now, and that's why the industry is, I don't think they really know which direction they need to go. Do they hedge that it stays this way? Or do they hedge that it's gonna go back somewhat? And they come down to obviously be competitive in bidding. I get a little bit of fear because I've seen this. You get one contract price and then come back in a year or two and say, boy, we're just so upside down. We've got to do something.
Aren't we already in that position because they're asking for a fee on the recycles now?
Well, right now, they take the recycling, they used to get some money to actually take it to the recycler. Now they're very rarely they get, sometimes they'll pay when they've got room for it. They'll still take recycling, but the recycling center, Rocky Mountain Recycling, most of the time is full because they can't resell the recyclables. So right now they're just basing it on, well, we're being able to really dispose of it at no cost or maybe getting a little bit of payment for it. That's why recycling cost for us is less than solid waste cost, because they were getting some money back for that, and they absorbed whatever risk that was.
Is there a
It's now
chance
got
we'll
that they're
go-
not going to get any of that, and they may have to start paying actually to have it disposed of.
So is there a chance we'll end up losing our recycling?
I think it'd always be provided. I honestly have thought through this, but is there a real advantage at some point to, if it's going to landfill anyway?
Yeah, I think it gives a false impression that it's actually being recycled.
Yeah.
And it's going in the same
Yeah,
way.
And that's-
So does that really matter if you have a recycling can? It's just
Long
garbage.
term, we're going to need to do more recycling. It makes it's going to be good. The question is, how long does this short-term economic situation last?
Yeah, and that's why I said that some of the, if you go out for bid, are you gonna, and it could be, okay, well, then ACE has motivation, they come back and they're still really low. It is kind of just a process to go through because it's an essential service, in my opinion. I mean, you have to always have garbage taken away. It's an essential service to the citizens. You have all kinds of disease and such that they did, and it's something that, believe me, if garbage route is 4 hours late, we get calls and saying they're 4 hours late. That people are really concerned with, so we want to make sure we're getting a good service at the best cost.
So help me out on municipal law here. As far as offering a sole source without competitive bid, how long can we do that legally? Can we just do that in perpetuity? We can just keep renewing with them without ever going out to bid?
I guess on these, there's no legal limits that we couldn't renew a contract.
Well, we did look at our procurement code because, the previous council wanted us to go out to bid, but there are some exceptions under formal bidding that if the council wants to just renegotiate a contract under our own procurement policy, you could. Municipalities are not subject to the Utah Procurement Code and the state statute unless you adopt it by reference. And so we have our own procurement policy, which allows you that option to renegotiate the contract, in my opinion, at this point. But, also, regardless, when you make an exception, you have to make sure that it's in the city's best interest and that it's a competitive price and that, there's good reason for it.
Mayor? I think one of the things, Blaine, you've said to me is that, and I want to make sure the council understands it, and that is whether we go out to bid or we renegotiate, you ought to understand that we expect the recycling fee to increase.
Yeah.
I hope that was clearly
Yeah, I think
understood.
we expect that either way.
The other comment I wanted to make is I'm hearkening back to something that former Councilman John Higginson said, who represents us on the Waste District, and he was saying something to the effect that they were looking at doing recycling at the plant, not having people sort their materials at their house, but having it sorted at the burn plant. I don't know how eminent that is, or how likely that is, but if that's something that may be a serious possibility within the next couple of years, and that might be another reason to negotiate an extension rather than enter into a bidding process for 5 years. Maybe we ought to have a conversation with John about that.
Yeah. If we do negotiate with them and we don't like what we negotiate, then can we go out for bid?
Yeah, we always can just say we're not going to renew the contract.
But
We
you
would
should
want to
make
do
that
that
decision
quickly,
soon,
yeah,
soon.
because it's going to be a bit of a process.
When does the contract expire? Did I
It
miss
expires
that?
on June 30th, so we'd have to have, if we made a change, we'd have to have enough time to give the new carrier enough time to gear up. So you probably need to have a decision by, if you went through the RFP and everything, and a decision by about mid-May, so that they've got lead time.
But if you negotiate, I guess we need to know, if you negotiate and you come back and go, way they're way
Yeah,
higher than what Bountiful or Kaysville or anybody's paying to negotiate with them, they're way too high.
And like I said, the only disadvantage is, right now is, okay, don't want to make their bid public. As I said, I think we can have some discussions with them, and even if it was a couple representatives of saying, okay, we think we can reach a contract, or we think we'd know pretty quick of saying, we just got to go out for bid. And so I guess I was saying, well, do you want to do that process, or should I just proceed with the RFP? Because we've got examples, and we can proceed with the RFP, and we'll do whatever is. Obviously, it's, I think of some impact on our staff. We do make a change, realize there is some real real cost of that, because you do have a complete change around of routes and those kind of things. It's proprietary. And not only so the citizens will have a change in route.
Would we be all right timeframe wise if we just asked you to, at our next meeting, report back with comparables to
Absolutely.
neighboring cities and check with John Higginson about
Some more of the information.
the likelihood of changes at the landfill?
Lisa, can that be discussed?
I'd actually suggest
Closed
that
session or not?
we go a step further and recommend that he open the conversations with him and say, hey, I'm trying to get him to approve just renegotiating this contract. That'll make everybody's life a whole lot easier. Can you give me some ideas where you're going to be?
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so, especially
shortens the time frame a little bit.
And maybe my suggestion is I could maybe share that with the mayor or somebody and say, hey, do we think this is something that is?
Could we do it in a closed meeting so we're not?
I don't know. I don't know if we can do
In my
contract
opinion, it's not
negotiation
a
closed meeting.
session. And I also want to clarify, in my opinion, it's not a sole source. What we're talking about is using the additional exemptions under your procurement policy, which says if it's over 25,000, the council can make exceptions. So,
Okay.
it's not a sole source, and it's, we're doing the public's business, but I agree with Blaine that we want to be mindful of, that negotiation. So I think it's helpful to have those comparables and a price range or something like that, or as he said, just talking with the mayor.
What if you have
So what triggers differently if we go out for a full RFP? Are we bound by procurement rules at that point to lowest bidder, lowest cost? Or can we use that simply like an RFQ process where we're just looking for the pricing and we'll adopt whatever we adopt?
Well, typically, after formal bidding, you award it to the lowest responsive bidder. So first of all, they have to comply with everything. But in making that determination of lowest responsible bidder, you can look at other things like
Right.
quality, like the, trucks or other things, or that we've worked with them before. So you don't have to just go with the lowest bidder. But I think what Blaine's saying is if you like the quality and you want to stick with what we have, why go through that pain and suffering?
Well, the only thing I would put on that is 2003, 2016. And there's maybe other players. I think it'd be worth at least casting the net, not necessarily taking a change of tack, but at least seeing what's out there. And if we're not bound, because the procurement rules are different for different government agencies, if we're not bound by offering an RFP outside the rules of, responsible bidder, and that, frankly, that's an esoteric criteria that can be applied, and somebody might challenge it. They might challenge your contract award if they think that the criteria was not.
That's just the risk.
Yeah, but that can happen anyway on an RFP. So I would be in favor of actually putting it out for RFP with the intention that we're going to remain open-minded, but we understand we have a known quantity. Because it can't hurt. If we're not bound
Well, you have to look at
unduly.
those factors, but I mean, everything equal, you would give it to the lowest bidder.
Everything equal, but yeah, I've encountered many times where they say they're equal on paper, but in practice, they're not actually equal. So, and that's where, from a contract standpoint, whatever that poison pill needs to look like to exit from a bad procurement.
But then it's gonna cost us a lot of money to switch, so if they're equal, but yet they're just a little bit less, it may cost us more in the long run.
Well, and that's criteria we could put into the RFP so that there's a matrices of various criteria that they have to meet. But yeah, I mean, you always do run the risk with an RFP that somebody says, yes, I can do that, and they really can't. Or they come back year two and say, oh yeah, we really underbid fuel prices or whatever, and sorry, we really have to do this or we're going out of business. I mean, there's always that possibility.
Well, and I think the point at issue here is the cost-benefit analysis of staff time to analyze that question of services being equal, and that's very complicated and difficult to determine. And so we might think we're saving a lot of money. We might think with the amount of research staff's able to do, we make the change. Because I agree with you in general. I mean, almost always it's best to cast the net. I
Yes.
absolutely agree with that.
But we can't cast the net, get the bids, and then negotiate with ACE on this afterwards, right? To get a better price.
Yeah, and that's generally, no, you
you
go out
can't
to
do that.
bid and you give it to the lowest responsible bidder.
How many providers are there? Do you have a feel for that?
Ones that I think would be
Responsible
qualified,
providers.
there's probably 3 or maybe 4. You got Robinson that probably could do it. You've got Waste Management. Seems like there's one other, ACE, and then there seems like there's one other that's of the size and quality that would meet, RFP. We make sure they have backup trucks that they're of a certain quality, those kind of things. So at least those other 2, I would probably have the ability to provide. How good their service is, I don't know, but they probably have the ability.
Do we know how many cities ACE does?
They do more in Salt Lake County than they do here in Davis. They're only Davis City, although they have a facility now in Kaysville. So they may be looking to expand their market a little bit more in Davis County.
I think they have a couple of other cities.
I know they do Bountiful's recycling.
Yeah, is there anything that keeps us, I mean, what about the possibility of just going out for RFP on garbage now and renegotiating another year or 2 contract on recycling?
Because then maybe you have different garbage days for your different.
Yeah. Yeah, you
No,
kind of get in there.
We can tell them the garbage days. We can specify that. can't
Well,
we?
I guess you could. You could specify you have to follow ACE's route.
Yeah, I mean, we're using different trucks.
Yeah.
Is that something that's?
I think it's right.
Some of that is because usually they will kind of look at it as a package too and say, okay, well, I do a little bit less on the garbage end because I'm going to make it up on the recycling. I mean, that's where you're going to see. You want to look at, talk about the responsible bidder as, okay, what's the cost overall, maybe for a typical household or something? Because you will see that some will come in, really high on a recycling, really low on a garbage, or vice versa. Any ones I've seen on garbage, you'll see that. They're not saying, well, almost all of them are the same on garbage, and you'll see one really low on garbage, one high on recycling, one low. And so they'll do that to try to to get the business. They're going to shuffle that a little bit.
Let me ask one question.
Go ahead, Steve.
maybe there, we can preserve both options as possibility with this idea and get the council more comfortable with exploring the negotiation option. Lisa, couldn't we have the mayor and 2 council members, for example, involved outside this meeting in reviewing, in participating in the negotiations and reviewing what data he comes up with and making some judgment whether this is in the best interest of the city or not, and then make that recommendation to the whole council?
Yes, on 2 fronts. It's technically not a quorum if you have the mayor and 2 council members, but my advice is always that you're doing the public's business, so we should,
Well, this
you
is
know,
in
have-
order to preserve the...
Right. Or you could
to-
say
to pro-
that's a subcommittee that you've asked to look into this and bring it back to the council.
Right, that's what I'm talking
Okay,
about, and
yeah,
that
that's-
protects that preserves the opportunity, the fairness in preserving the opportunity for ACE disposal
obviously
to
it-
bid by not divulging what their numbers are, but at least a subcommittee, the council would be involved in evaluating that.
Right. But in my opinion, when it is time for you to make a decision, that is public information.
Sure, I understand that, but that subcommittee, if it makes the council more comfortable in exploring that option, pursuing that option any further, several of them could be involved outside this meeting.
Yes. What do you feel?
I don't know if that makes a difference or not.
I think we need to make a decision pretty soon, so if we're gonna do this, we need to get with ACE, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd be
another
willing
2
to
weeks.
meet with us about any time.
How many trucks do they, I mean, so I get done on Wednesday. People just south of me are done on Thursday. How many days do we get
Tuesdays
service?
combined, so
Monday, Tuesday,
Just Tuesday,
no,
Wednesday,
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
3 days.
You know, and that's something we actually had in our original RFP, that we did not allow Monday pickup because of holiday problems, and then we preferred not Friday pickup, so they met that requirement before. But we kind of said, no, we won't, you can't do it on Monday. Now, we'd probably do that again, just because there's too many shifts in holidays that Monday holidays throws everybody off, and we specifically said that, no pickup on the 4th of July, some of those things that we put in there.
And so on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, they have 3 trucks in
I
town?
think 2 or 3.
5 trucks in town?
For 2 or 3 for garbage, and then when it's recycling day, I think they run 2 recycling trucks.
And
I
that's
don't think they have
another-
more than 3 at
That's
a time.
another piece of information that we were impressed with, I think, when we talked to them last year, is how many of their trucks have turned over to natural gas. So,
I mean, I'd be happy to work with Blaine on this.
I
I'm
will.
not sure, George, you've got some procurement experience. I
Yeah,
think.
but it's not municipal level, so it's a different set of rules completely, but I'm willing to work on it, yeah.
And Bill, you're interested in garbage?
Yeah, I produced a ton of it. I got 2 cans, down from 3.
So if the council's willing, how about we have Blaine set up something, let's
Yeah.
look into it and then come back
Gather
with a
some data and
recommendation?
set up something, and then bring back a recommendation.
and this is complicated because of the recycling complication, but I was gonna ask anyway while we're talking garbage again. Myself and a lot of my neighbors, we wish that our regular garbage was like every other week and our recycling was
Yeah.
every week. I mean, it fills up so fast. So I don't know if anyone else has that issue.
You know,
I have
some of
that
it that
issue.
comes up in general is that you have smelly disposables.
Oh, I know.
And if
So
it
you
sits there
can't-
2 weeks in the
You can't go
summertime.
every other week on the black, but
Yeah.
we never fill ours up. And we're a family of 8 people who live in our house. And we-
Yeah,
and we
I'm
fill
the
up.
same way at my place, you don't ever fill it,
Recycle
but
so fast.
that's one of the big reasons, is because you have things that they can't set for 2 weeks. That's the big reason. And you know, they usually do the every other week recycling, because historically, people didn't fill that up as much.
Okay, so if to move forward, Bill, George, and I are going to work with Blaine on this. If we can report back within 2 weeks, we will. If drop dead, we probably need to get the RFP out by April.
Yes.
If we're
Yes,
going to do that.
yes,
Okay?
I appreciate that.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you both.
Next up, Mayor's report. Short, I wanted to make you aware that
Chief Child is doing a lot of great outreach. He's contacted all the religious, all the LDS stakes and the other congregations. He's meeting with them, talking about crime, talking about mental health. I visited one of his sessions. It was really helpful. There was a lot of interest. Just doing a lot of outreach that I think is really appreciated by the community.
He's done some neighborhood things with ours as well. We really
I think he's
appreciated
doing
that.
an excellent job with it.
Also, I made Steve caught me in a mistake I made last month, or last mayor's report. I think when we were talking about the metrics, I think I reported 30 Utopia signups a month. It's not, it's 30 a quarter, not a month, so it's roughly 10 a month, or on average 30 a quarter. Just wanted to make sure I'm correct on that. And then that's all I have for this. We'll turn to Steve to talk about all the fun we've been having with the legislature.
Well, and I don't know how much you want to talk about it. Did you guys all get the?
Is everyone getting the daily updates?
We are.
Okay, so you also got the talking points sheet about the Senate bill and the House bill that are trying to improve the collection of sales tax on remote sales. You got those, so I don't need to.
Well, I think the only question is, we have, it's going to be fairly controversial in the House, and we have our state representative is on the fence right now whether to support that or not. If we could decide, if the council feels strongly, we could all ask him to support that. If you don't feel like we need to do that as a council, just continue to lobby him individually.
As much as I hate it, I think that we should be doing it. And I hate it nationally, but right is right.
I think we all hate it. The issue is the law's already been decided. It's just a collection issue.
Yeah, that's right, no. So I would say that we should encourage him to support it.
If you're all of that mindset, that would be a strong message that we could send, the mayor could send to.
I could send him another message saying the council discussed this and they're unanimous, asking for you to support, I forget which.
Well, it's a House bill and a Senate bill.
And a Senate bill.
House bill
I believe our senators.
235 and Senate bill 182. Yeah. The league is, the legislators sponsoring these bills, both bills came to the policy committee yesterday and made good points, I think, and one of their good points was that many states have already taken these kind of steps that are encompassed in these two bills, and as more states do this, that will increase the pressure on Congress to do something nationally about it. So I would recommend we put the pressure on our legislators. Anybody object to that? Are you okay with that, representing that you're unanimously in support of those bills? George?
Again,
You okay?
and I stated this in our work session, but it's not even the revenue issue for me as the fairness.
Issue.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like the revenue side too.
It's almost like a tax cut to certain kinds of businesses for no legitimate reason.
Yeah,
And then they have less of an investment in a community in infrastructure.
The fairness is to our businesses.
Yeah.
The arguments some years back used to be, well, this is too hard to comply with and the technology's not there, but those things have all been addressed and improved upon. And
This should have been settled long ago.
yeah, okay. I really, unless you want to ask me about anything else, that's my report on legislative.
I do want to make one announcement on SB 114. I made an incorrect statement last time, which is in the minutes because that's how I said it. I did say that the SB 114 allowed for cities to have their telecommunication services extend beyond their city limits. That only applies to electrical services, not to telecommunications. However, on that same front, they did restrict the bill down to only the 11 Utopia cities, so it is Utopia-specific legislation.
And my understanding is the version that passed the Senate yesterday requires only the 11 cities to, it's basically a one-time offer. You get to decide if you want to vote this year and then it expires. I think if it was successful somewhere, you could run the bill again, but it's a one-time offer for Layton.
Right.
Essentially.
That's what makes me smile, because everything on Utopia has always been a one-time offer. So, it's more of the same.
Okay, two more things quickly. One is the goal, submit your suggested goals by Thursday to me. Now, these could be big things, these could be little things, there's no magic number. This is just you, each individually, submitting those to me, and I'll compile them and get them back to you for a rating, so by Thursday. Don't worry about the format, Robin, or whether you have stated it appropriately or not. I'll call you if I need to.
You probably will.
Okay. Then the other thing is unfortunately I learned today that our TAP application for UDOT to give us some money to help with the trailhead down there was not deemed a priority among the competing applications, so we're not going to get that. But so that means we'll have to do that our part of it through the RDA. Maverick will cost share with us. But the next step in that process will be for me to bring to you a contract to take the design to the next level to be sufficient for us to give to Maverick and have them incorporated into their construction specifications, their site plan specifications and so forth. So I'll have that proposal. This is Dan Sontag of MGB plus A, taking the concept plan to what's called a design development level. Then we feel like that's sufficient for the Maverick to take it from there and develop the bidding specs and so forth. But that'll be forthcoming. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any miscellaneous business? I'm not aware of a need for a closed meeting, and I don't think we want to continue.
I do have one item.
For closed meeting?
No, miscellaneous business.
Okay.
You're going too fast. I sent out for the
Citizen
come meet
outreach?
with you, yeah, for the citizens outreach, a schedule, and I got some people saying put a schedule together and just drop names in. Paul, I didn't know if you were planning to participate or not. I wasn't meaning to insult you when I said that.
No. So what I think is, why don't you do it with council members, and I will try to.
You may show up sometimes?
I may show up sometimes.
Okay. I have
sometimes Wednesday night I have some other responsibilities, but most of the time I don't. But it
well,
depends if I can
I know you have many things that we don't have.
If I can get a
to do,
hall
so-
pass or not.
Okay.
Do we have an opportunity to talk any further with the county about the
Well,
Basin property?
I have an appointment to talk further with the property manager and the public works director, but
Okay.
not commissioners at this point.
You'll keep us posted?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll have a further report next time on that. And by the way, those of you that are new probably may not know the procedure for unlocking the doors and where to find a key. Do all of you know that? If you want to hang around after, I can show you how to do that. So,
I don't know that.
Oh, you don't either?
I just use my key and.
Well,
you should
stand there
learn.
if somebody needs
But
to-
then you need to unlock the door so that the public can come in, and if you just want to hang around a minute after, I'll show all of you how to do
There's
that.
a little key box outside Blaine's office that you
Yeah.
have to go unlock it with.
Be real quick,
You
I
can
can
send
show
this
you.
electronically too.
What? I can send it, yeah,
That'd be great, because I lose paper.
okay. I will send it to everybody. Were there enough for Steve to get one?
Oh, I don't need one, do I? I'm not coming.
Oh, come on, Steve.
I was just trying to be courteous.
When you get it filled out, then is this
It's
it?
full, it's filled out.
Oh, okay, well,
I'll leave it on my
Okay.
desk, and you can
All right.
look at it anytime you want.
So
Mayor,
does
mo-
this give us
I have
all
one.
equal number of turns?
Yeah, except for me, and what I'd said in the original thing that nobody complained about is since I kind of put it together, I was gonna go twice as much as everybody else. Other than that, everybody is within one slot.
See, in my response, my understanding was put us all in equal number of turns. And,
I don't care.
and so,
rotate.
If you want more, put yourself down some more. You can see the count at the bottom.
I'll give you May 15th or May 18th. You can have it.
So
I
I've got
won't
a
be here
count
for
at
that
the-
one.
I've got a count for the 2.5-year period at the bottom.
I have an appointment, I think I sent you this via email, Mel Miles for the Whitaker Museum Board. He's been recruited, it took a while to get him on board, but now he's agreed to do it. I think I sent his sheet out, he's retired from
County Personnel
the county personnel
Sure.
office. Spence Packer and the crew would really like him. So I need a motion I would nominate him, and if you would approve the nomination of Mel Miles to the Whitaker Museum Board.
Motion to approve.
There's a motion and a second.
Sounds like it to me.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Awesome.
Okay, YouTube is over. Can you stop that?
We will.
Well, Kyle says it looks good and the sound is good.
Yeah, but he's already
saying we
need a second camera.
I don't think so. One cap.
Jake, well, yeah, it's fed through these.
Direct feed.
Yes.
Better than sitting here.
Yeah, Jake emailed me and said, you can hear better, you can hear better through the streaming than you can in here because of the reverberation, so. Okay, I'll go.
So if anybody has any changes to that list, email them to me and I'll send out an update.
Disparaging.